Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into the mud-soaked past to explore one of the most tragic, bizarre and strangely flavourful chapters in modern history, the food of World War I. You'll find yourself shoulder to shoulder with soldiers in the trenches, tasting the grim glory of cold bully beef and concrete biscuits, and wondering how anyone got through a single day with such questionable nourishment. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this, not without indigestion. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps more sleepy history nerds like us find their way here. Where are you watching from tonight, by the way? Drop your city in the comments and your time. Always love seeing how far this thing reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink as a whistle blows. Not the polite kind that means someone's late to dinner, the kind that tells you it's time to charge into no man's land or at least move to a new section of the trench before another shell finds its mark. But tonight's not about charging, tonight your stomach is rumbling. You're still in your greatcoat, damp and grimy, with boots squelching in something you don't want to identify. And the ration truck has finally arrived. The excitement is cautious. Food isn't exactly something to look forward to here, but it's better than going hungry. Someone tosses you a tin of bully beef, the British Army's gift to your taste buds, also known as corned beef compressed into a dense brick of despair. It clinks against your mess tin like a blunt instrument. No one pretends it tastes good. It's mostly salt, grease, and texture, if you can call it that. You take out your trench knife to open the tin. There's no luxury of a proper can opener. The lid peels back with a hiss, and a sickly metallic tang hits your nostrils. It's not rotten, but it's also not rotten. The meat inside glistens in the grey trench light, flecked with fat and that mysterious jelly substance that manages to be both solid and wet. There's no fire to heat it, of course. Fires attract snipers, and smoke gives away your position, so you spoon it cold into your mouth. The taste? Salty gritty, like someone soaked a meat sponge in seawater and left it out overnight. But it's calories. That's all it needs to be. All around you, other men are going through the same ritual. Some eat fast to get it over with. Others nibble it slowly, as if trying to convince themselves it's pâté. Conversation is minimal. The soundscape is mostly chewing, coughing, and the occasional "this again." One guy swears he saw a bit of hoof in his last tin. The British soldiers' daily rations are supposed to include a mix of meat, bread or biscuit, a vegetable portion, tea, and the all-important tobacco. In theory. In reality, by the time it gets to the front, through mud, shell fire, and often via exhausted horses or overworked supply trucks, it's a miracle you get anything edible at all. Your second course tonight, a scoop of mashed turnips that may or may not have once been warm. You wonder when it was last in vegetable form. Tastes vaguely earthy with a weird sour note that might be fermentation, or just bad luck. And then there's bread, or something like it. More often than not, it's hard tack. A biscuit so dense and dry you need to soak it in something before you attempt to bite. That, though, is tomorrow's fun. Tonight, it's all about the bully beef. You glance at a small booklet tucked into your breast pocket, your field service pocketbook. Inside, there's a section detailing how to survive off your rations and stretch them as needed. It's almost laughable. One tip suggests using fat from the meat to grease your rifle. Another says you can boil the tin of meat in water if you're lucky enough to have a mess fire. That's optimistic. Fires are rare luxuries here, mostly reserved for behind-the-lines billets or fleeting moments of silence between barrages. As you scrape the bottom of the tin, a rat scuttles past your foot, bold and well-fed. Rats here grow fat off scraps, corpses, and spilled rations. They are fearless, huge, and likely healthier than you. You stare at it for a moment. For just a split second, the thought crosses your mind. How hungry would you have to be? That's not an abstract question. Starvation has always been a hidden front in every war. In this one, it's just as cruel. Soldiers often barter, steal or hoard anything remotely edible. A man might kill for chocolate, trade socks for dried fruit, smuggle in a tin of sardines like it's forbidden treasure. The bully beef, despite all its flaws, is a lifeline. It's shelf-stable, lasts forever, or seems to, and requires no preparation. That's why it's issued by the millions of tins. By the end of the war, British factories will have churned out hundreds of millions of cans. The soldiers may loathe it, but they depend on it. Still you wonder, how did anyone think this was the best option? That's where history starts to split hairs. Some claim the beef came from South America, Others swear it was horse meat from Australia. The truth? Probably both and neither. Supply lines are notoriously opaque, especially in wartime. But there's one thing every historian agrees on. It wasn't chosen for taste. It was chosen because it travelled well and didn't kill too many people. Though, let's be honest, there's an open debate about that last part. Infections from spoiled tins, botulism scares, and mystery meat stories pop up now and then in the archives. Some men swore they got trench fever from bad food, others that the bully beef kept them alive. A few claimed both were true. You wipe your spoon clean with the corner of your coat and slip it back into your pouch. Dinner's over. Your stomach isn't full, not really, but it's quiet, for now. You sit back against the muddy wall listening to distant shell fire and closer snoring. It's not luxury, it's not comfort, but it's food, and in the trenches of World War I, that's worth more than gold. You reach into your kit bag, fingers brushing against the rock-hard edge of your next meal. A biscuit that doesn't crumble, snap or yield to pressure. It's officially called a hardtack, but around here you've heard it called everything from toothbreaker to war brick. Some even use it to hammer in tent pegs. Tonight though, it's dinner. Or at least dinner's unfortunate companion. You grip the biscuit and give it a try. It doesn't budge. Not with your teeth anyway. You tap it against your helmet and it rings faintly like dull iron. It's made from flour, water and something resembling regret. Baked until it's harder than memory, it was designed to last indefinitely, which unfortunately it does. This one may have been issued sometime during the Boer War and it tastes like it. Some soldiers soak them in tea or stew until they resemble something chewable. You don't have that luxury right now, so you go for the standard approach. Brute force and low expectations. With a sharp jab of your bayonet, you break off a jagged corner. It splinters into your mouth like gravel. You start chewing slowly, cautiously, feeling each molar creak under the pressure. There's a vague, wheaty flavour, buried under layers of dryness and something you sincerely hope is just stale air. It crumbles into a sandy paste that dries your tongue instantly. Water would help, but the trench canteen is nearly empty, and the thought of refilling it with that slimy green stuff from the water drum is not appealing. Around you, other soldiers are gnawing on their own bricks of despair. One guy is smart. He's hollowed out a small trench in his biscuit, poured in some bully beef and called it a sandwich. You consider doing the same, but the effort feels Herculean. Instead, you just chew and chew, counting the seconds until it softens enough to swallow. Hardtack's not unique to the British. It's been around for centuries. Sailors ate it during the Napoleonic Wars, and Union soldiers carried it through the American Civil War. Some say it's the most indestructible food ever made by humans. There are actual preserved samples in museums that are still technically edible, though no one has dared to try. Except, of course, for you and every other poor soul stuck in this trench. The funny thing? In theory, hardtack could last forever. That was the idea. Food that didn't rot, mould or attract bugs. Except it did attract bugs. You've seen biscuits crawling with weevils, tiny black dots that wriggle just under the surface. The real veterans don't even flinch. They call them meat sprinkles, and just eat around them. You, still relatively new to all this, pretend not to see anything and keep chewing. One day, someone in your unit gets creative and tries to carve one of these biscuits into a domino. Works pretty well until it cracks mid-game. Others use them as makeshift shims for gear repairs. One guy even carves a crude heart into his and mails it home as a love token. His sweetheart probably thought he was being romantic. In reality, he just couldn't eat the damn thing. You've heard stories from the French troops, who are just over the rise. Their version of hardtack is called pain de guerre, war bread, and while it's slightly softer, it's just as grim. The Germans, by contrast, have a dry rye bread that at least has some structure and flavour. They call it Kommissbrot, still no baguette, but it holds together better than this crumbling artefact in your hand. There's an open debate among soldiers and historians alike. Which was worse, the hardtack or the bully beef? Some say hardtack wins because it's practically inedible. Others vote for bully beef because of the sheer volume of it consumed. The truth is, they work best, well, least terribly, together. If you soak the biscuit in the beef fat, it softens just enough to chew without breaking a molar. That's the magic combo. Not delicious, just survivable. As the night deepens, a few men try to cook something from the scraps. One of the older lads breaks up several hardtack biscuits, mixes them with hot water and leftover stew juice, and calls it trench pudding. It looks like wet cement and smells like regret, but he swears by it. You take a bite and find it marginally less awful than expected. There's even a salty crunch that might be from the turnips, or might not. You don't ask. Somewhere behind you a rat squeals, chased by a boot. Someone else swears and drops his biscuit in the mud. No one bothers trying to clean it off. He just tosses it into the darkness, where it lands with a heavy thud and probably remains untouched for the rest of the war. A faint drizzle begins, because of course it does, and you pull your coat tighter. The cold, the damp, the bone-deep weariness, all of it presses in. You huddle in your dugout with your last remaining biscuit chunk and contemplate whether you're more tired or more hungry. Eventually hunger loses. You pocket the biscuit for later, maybe breakfast, or a weapon. Either way, it'll still be here. In quieter moments, soldiers swap hardtack horror stories. One man claims to have broken a tooth on his third day. Another swears his biscuit was stamped with a date from the Crimean War. It's probably just gallows humour, but you've seen enough to believe anything. You lie back in the trench, eyes adjusting to the gloom, listening to the distant rumbles of artillery and the muffled conversation of men trying to forget they're half-starved in a pit of mud. Someone sings softly, an old pub tune, off-key but comforting. You clutch your biscuit chunk like a talisman, dry crumbs flaking off into your coat, and close your eyes. In a war where even food is a battle, every bite feels like both victory and defeat. But for now, you're fed, sort of. You're alive. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, there might even be a can of peaches in the next supply crate. They say one made it through last week. No one's seen the guy since. The morning creeps in like a whisper. Grey, wet, and cold enough to make your fingers feel like someone else's. You wake not because you're rested, but because someone shoves a dented mug into your hands. It's warm. It's steaming. It smells vaguely of something comforting and something burned. Tea. British Army issued, trench brewed and boiled in a pot that's probably never been cleaned. You sip it anyway. It's gritty, tannic and a little metallic, but that heat crawling down your throat is pure magic. A cigarette appears next, offered wordlessly by the man beside you. You take it. Everyone does. You've started smoking more here than you ever thought you would. Nobody judges you. Tobacco and tea, these are the true lifeblood of the trenches. They wake you up, calm your nerves, distract your mind, and occasionally help you forget that your last meal came with a side of beetles. You light up using a match that's been kept dry in someone's sock. The cigarette tastes like paper and dust, but it brings your nerves down from a simmer. The morning routine begins. Some soldiers clean rifles, others check boots or letters from home. A few just sit and stare. You clutch your tea like it's a relic from a better world and blow gently on the surface, watching the steam curl upward like ghosts. There's something almost sacred about this moment. In the lull between misery and madness, tea becomes more than a drink. It's ritual. It's the one thing the army tries to keep consistent. No matter how low the rations fall, some form of tea almost always shows up. Sometimes it's just loose leaves in a dirty sock dipped in boiling water. Other times it's been pre-mixed with sugar and evaporated milk, brewed in old petrol cans and served lukewarm with a side of grease. You remember one especially awful morning when the cook, if he deserves that title, accidentally brewed it in a tin that once held fish. The result was fishy tea, a horrifying experience that no one has ever really forgiven him for. But most days, it's drinkable. And when it's hot, it's holy. A soldier on your left pulls out a small tin of condensed milk. It's a rare treasure. He must have traded half his kit for it. He squeezes a dollop into his mug, stirs it with a grimy spoon, and sighs like a man who's just remembered what comfort feels like. You'd kill for a spoonful of that milk, but you don't ask. In the trenches, generosity is reserved for truly desperate moments, and you're not quite there. Yet, tea isn't just a British thing either. You've seen the French with their café au lait when they can get it. The Germans, meanwhile, are more likely to sip ersatz coffee, made from roasted acorns or chicory when the blockade cuts off real beans. Everyone, everywhere, clings to some warm liquid in a cup. It's like the whole war is built on caffeine and shared suffering. Back home, propaganda posters show soldiers smiling over their tea and cigarettes, brave and unbothered. They leave out the part where you're huddled in 3 inches of mud with trench foot creeping up your leg. But those little comforts, tea, tobacco, do have power. They can stop a man from breaking down. That's not just a figure of speech. In more than one recorded case when rations failed, when letters stopped arriving, when the sound of shelling got too close for too long, what brought a soldier back from the edge was a hot drink and a smoke passed down the line. There's something else you've started to notice. The economy of addiction. Cigarettes and loose tobacco have become trench currency. You can trade a smoke for a sock, a spoonful of jam, or the last biscuit chunk in someone's pack. If you're lucky enough to get a care package from home with actual branded cigarettes, like Players or Woodbine, you're sitting on a gold mine. Once, a guy in your unit got a box of Turkish cigarettes, the real deal. Within hours, he had traded them for chocolate, rum, a working lighter, and someone's spare pair of the wool underwear. No regrets either. Luxury like that doesn't last long out here. But the tobacco trade has its darker corners too. You've heard stories how one man rolled dried tea leaves into paper when he ran out of tobacco, gave himself the shakes for 3 days, another tried smoking old pages from his field manual. The ink did weird things to his lungs. But these aren't cautionary tales here, they're rites of passage. And then there's the tea wallers, not official, just a nickname for the trench cooks who specialise in keeping the tea going. Their job might seem minor, but morale hinges on those guys. If the tea runs out, so does patience, so does the will to crawl over the top and do anything at all. They're not saints, these wallers, but they keep the engine running. You've even heard of a sergeant refusing to order a patrol until tea had been served. He said he wasn't about to risk life and limb without his godforsaken cup. There's scholarly debate about the psychological role tea and tobacco played in the trenches. Some say it merely soothed. Others argue it was essential, a way to create order in chaos, something to anchor you to your own humanity when everything else had gone muddy and mad. There's even discussion among historians about whether the British focus on tea helped them endure the war longer than they should have, one cup of denial at a time. You finish your mug and exhale slowly, warmth still clinging to your throat. Around you the trench begins to stir more fully. Orders are passed down. There's talk of a repair patrol tonight, maybe a fresh draft of replacements arriving. No one seems overly enthusiastic. You crush your cigarette butt into the wall of the trench, watching it smoulder for a moment before going dark. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is coming soon. Rumour says we might get bacon today. It probably means salted pork fat, but after a week of bully beef and brick biscuits, you'll take whatever the trench gods offer. For now, though, you savour the last wisps of tea steam, the nicotine ghost in your lungs, and the odd comfort of being just awake enough, just warm enough to keep going. It's not much, but in the trenches, it's everything. The drizzle turns to rain, as it always does, the kind of rain that doesn't fall in drops but seeps out of the very air like the sky's just sweating despair. You're standing ankle-deep in mud, boots squelching with each step, when you notice something wrong with your bully beef tin. You've opened a dozen of these by now, and the sound, the smell, the sad little shimmer of fat, it's all predictable, but this one is different. First, its smells are off. Not violently bad, just wrong. You know that unsettling edge, like meat that's not quite gone bad, but is definitely getting ideas. You peer into the tin, and that's when you see them. Tiny white wrigglers squirming around the jelly layer like they own the place. Maggots. You almost drop it. Instead, you close the tin slowly, like you're tucking away a secret no one wants. You look around. Do you tell someone? Complain? Ask for a replacement? That's adorable. There are no replacements. You either scrape the top layer off and try to forget what you saw, or you stay hungry. You know what most men choose, so you grab your knife and skim off the jelly and the worst of the intruders. It's not perfect. You try not to think about what's left behind. Someone nearby mutters something about extra protein. You want to laugh, but your stomach turns instead. Maggots in the rations aren't exactly rare. These tins travel for weeks, even months, across oceans and battlefields. They sit in sun, freezing cold, and get dropped, dented, and stored who knows where. Sometimes they're packed poorly, sometimes they're sealed badly, and sometimes you get the bonus course. There's even talk that some tins are recycled, emptied, received, filled, and soldered shut again. That one may be a myth, but in this place reality often seems worse than rumour. You remember reading once, back when life had reading time, that maggots were used in medicine to clean wounds. A weird thought, that something eating rotting flesh could be considered helpful. Out here, though, they're just another hazard. Along with trenchfoot, lice, gas, shrapnel and boredom so thick it makes you want to run toward the bullets, just to feel something new. To your meat. It's not just the maggots. The texture has changed. Normally it's more or less a firm slab. This one is soft, mushy. You scoop out a spoonful, sniff it, hesitate. Your body screams no, but your stomach is louder. You eat it. It's warm from your hand, slimy and bitter with metal. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself everyone's got a story like this. And they do. One man swore he found a dead mouse in a bread bag. Another claims he bit into a biscuit and a beetle crawled out the other end. But the king of horror meals was a bloke who opened a tin of meat and found a small human-like tooth embedded in the jelly. That one made the rounds for weeks, though no one knows if it was true. Doesn't matter, really. In the trenches, truth is just the stuff no one has disproved yet. The worst part isn't even the food, it's the way you get used to it, how fast your brain rewires itself to accept this new baseline. 10 days ago you would have gagged and thrown it away. Now, you fish out the cleaner bits and chew slowly, hoping for flavour, settling for neutral. And still, your gut tightens after every meal. You've had more than a few nights spent crouched over a latrine trench, knees shaking, whispering prayers to whatever deity might watch over food poisoning victims. The medics don't get too concerned unless you're vomiting blood or can't stand. Everything else is just normal digestive distress. The cook, Private Barker, isn't really to blame. He does what he can with what arrives. He's not a trained chef. He's a former plumber from Leeds with a permanent scowl and surprisingly delicate handwriting. He once tried to liven things up by mixing marmalade into the bully beef and calling it trench chutney. It wasn't good, but it was different. That's really all that anyone asks for out here. Different. Barker swears the worst thing he ever saw was a tin of something labelled only Meat Product B. No one knows what the A or C versions looked like. Meat Product B came out as a grey sludge with fibres and a faint tang of formaldehyde. Even he didn't serve it. Buried it behind the latrine and didn't speak of it again. You pick at your food with less and less enthusiasm. A few men nearby are making jokes. Gallows humour, always ready. Hey, I think my beef's still winking at me. Trade you 3 maggots for a rat tail. One guy swears he's going vegetarian, which draws actual laughter. There's no plant-based option in hell. Still, not everyone's laughing. The younger guys, the fresh replacements, struggle the most. You see one, pale and shaky, holding his tin at arm's length, trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. You watch as he swallows hard and forces a bite down, eyes watering. No one mocks him. You've all been that kid. This whole scene, rotting meat, crawling insects, men pretending to eat like it's normal, it paints a weird kind of picture. You start to wonder how many other wars were fought not just with guns, but with guts. Literal guts. The ability to choke down whatever's in front of you and keep marching. There's scholarly argument about just how bad the food really was. Some historians argue that the quality wasn't always terrible, that bad batches and horror stories are overrepresented in memoirs and letters. But those historians weren't here. They didn't open tins with things moving inside them. They didn't trade socks for a spoonful of jam or pretend the bread mould was just a new kind of cheese. You finish what you can and bury the rest in a shallow hole behind the trench wall. Not because you think it'll decompose, it won't, but because the rats will find it if you don't, and then you'll be hearing the scratch and skitter all night. You already sleep light. You don't need more visitors. You rinse your spoon with what passes for water and tuck it away. The rain is picking up again. Your stomach feels queasy, but it's better than empty. You lean back against the trench wall, close your eyes, and try not to think about what you've just eaten, or what's eating it now inside you. It's early afternoon when word filters down the line. You're to prepare for a possible stand-to at dusk. But before that, you're issued something whispered about like legend, the iron ration. It arrives in a waxed cloth pouch, small and oddly dense, and everyone stares at theirs like they've just been handed a relic from the Holy Land. You've heard stories about the iron ration, not many first-hand. That's because no one ever eats it, unless things have truly gone sideways. The idea is simple, a sealed backup meal, reserved for emergency use only. It's supposed to be your last line of defence between life and starvation. If you're surrounded, cut off, marching for days, lost in no man's land or stuck behind enemy lines, this is what you're supposed to survive on. Which means, of course, that opening it voluntarily is frowned upon, both by officers and by fate itself. It's like tempting the universe to throw you into the worst situation imaginable. You break the seal and suddenly it's snowing, your trench is gone, and Jerry's set up shop in your old sleeping hole. You finger the knot on the cloth pouch. No one's looking too closely. You could open it now, just a peek, but you hesitate. That pouch has become a sort of trench insurance policy. Knowing it's there makes the hunger easier to bear. You've heard stories of men who've carried their iron ration from the first week of training to the very end of the war, unopened and pristine. Others kept theirs tucked under their shirts like a talisman close to the heart. You finally untie the knot and take a look, just for morale reasons, you tell yourself. Inside, it's a grim little assortment. One flat biscuit, a slab of compressed meat. Some say it's pemmican. Others say it's just a sad brick of beef and lard and a small pouch of tea or sometimes cocoa powder. Some rations even contain a sugar cube or a couple of salt tablets. You stare at it, wondering how this is supposed to keep a man alive in enemy territory for days. It looks like it wouldn't get a terrier through an afternoon walk. But that's not the point. The iron ration isn't about flavour or satisfaction. It's about discipline. About hope. If you're eating it, things have gone bad. Real bad. You're supposed to hold on to it like it's sacred. Officers will punish you for opening it early, at least if they find out. Some soldiers tell stories of court-martials, though more often it's a fine or just a stern lecture, and a look of disappointed fatherhood from someone who's barely older than you are. You remember a sergeant once telling you, that iron ration ain't for today, it's for the day you wake up and the sun doesn't rise and no one's left but you and your shadow. At the time you thought it was just poetry. Now you realise he was only half joking. There's an open debate among military historians about how effective these rations really were. Nutritionally, they're bare bones. Maybe 1,000 calories on a generous estimate. But it's not about nutrition. It's about survival, physically, psychologically. It's a vote of confidence from the quartermaster's office that you might live long enough to eat it. That's grim, but somehow reassuring. You carefully rewrap the contents, tie the knot again with practiced fingers, and slip the pouch back into your pack. It feels heavier now, not because it's changed, but because it represents so much. Your worst day, your last meal, your stubborn hope. That night, as dusk bleeds and bleeds into dark and the stand-to begins, you keep one hand near your rifle and the other brushing the pouch. Shells rumble far off, but tonight is quiet. Almost too quiet. You watch the enemy lines through the dim gloom, eyes adjusting to the black-on-black contrast of the battlefield at rest. Someone jokes about opening their ration just to see if it summons a gas attack. Another swears that a guy in a different unit used his iron ration as a pillow and got shot in the face the next morning. Superstition runs strong out here. You're not laughing. Neither is anyone else. In truth, the iron ration has taken on an almost mythic status, like some medieval amulet you carry into war. It's not nourishment. It's a promise. You can starve a little longer because you could eat it, but you won't. Not until you absolutely must. You think back to training camp when you were first issued one. The sergeant made a whole speech about it. You'll want to eat it, you'll stare at it, but don't. This is your escape ticket. This is your final favour from the king. At the time, you laughed along with everyone else. Now, you feel the weight of that speech like a rock in your gut. There's a weird fringe belief too, one shared in whispers late at night, passed like ghost stories. Some say if you die with your iron ration unopened, your soul rests easier. You did your duty, followed orders, never gave in. But if you open it and still die, well, they say the ghosts of the trenches all open theirs, and they're still hungry. The rain returns after midnight, soft and steady. You shift in your dugout, trying to stay dry. Your fingers twitch toward your ration pouch again. Not to open it, just to feel it. The fabric is damp, the contents solid and unchanging. You imagine biting into that dry biscuit, cracking it in half with your teeth, tasting nothing but starch and determination. But you don't. Not tonight. You'll wait. There's still food coming in, even if it's questionable. There's still warmth from a shared blanket and the comfort of boots touching yours under the plank floor. And besides, you tell yourself, if you eat it now, you'll just jinx everything. That's the real magic of the iron ration. It doesn't feed you, but somehow it still keeps you going. The trench you're assigned to runs just east of the River Somme, but today you're rotating out. For a few brief miraculous days, you're being moved to a reserve position behind the front, someplace marginally less horrible, where the mud doesn't actively try to eat your boots and the rats have a bit more shame. And there, for the first time in what feels like forever, you catch the smell of something different. Something rich, warm, almost French. You follow the scent like a man possessed until you find its source, a small smoky campfire hidden behind a clump of shattered trees. Around it, a half-dozen French poilus, Those sturdy, mustachioed infantrymen in their heavy blue coats are huddled over a battered pot suspended on a bent metal frame. You don't speak much French, and they don't speak much English, but there's one language you all understand: hunger. With a grin and a shrug, one of the older Frenchmen dips a ladle into the pot and offers you a cup. You nod gratefully, hands shaking a little as you cradle it. Inside is something you'd almost forgotten existed: actual flavour. It's a stew, thick and steaming, flecked with herbs, chunks of potato, onions, maybe even a sliver or two of real meat. You sip it slowly, reverently, and the world tilts ever so slightly back towards sanity. The French approach to wartime rations is different. Where your own army focuses on calorie counts and shelf life, the French, bless their culinary souls, make an effort to retain something resembling real food. Even in the chaos of war, even under constant shelling, their cooks manage to produce something you'd willingly put in your mouth. Wine is common, often added to stews or passed around in dented canteens. Cheese, real cheese, isn't unheard of, and they always seem to have bread that doesn't double as a masonry tool. You share what you have: a tin of tobacco, a few biscuits no one should ever eat, and in return they give you more stew and a small wedge of soft, creamy cheese that smells terrible and tastes divine. You'd forgotten what fat tasted like when it's not from a tin of bully beef. This melts on your tongue and warms your belly in a way no iron ration ever could. One of the Frenchmen, a skinny fellow with a blackened pipe clenched between yellowed teeth, points to the cheese and chuckles. "Camembert," he says proudly, tapping his chest. "Pas pour les boches." You don't need a translation, no Germans allowed. You learn quickly that the French soldiers take great pride in their food, even under siege, even when it's stretched to the point of absurdity. Their supply lines, though fragile, are prioritised differently. While British quartermasters hand out tins by weight and calorie count, the French try to keep morale up through flavour. There's even a black market among soldiers, trading goods from home: a tin of sardines, a bottle of red, a bar of soap scented with lavender. Currency in the trenches, especially French ones. Some nights you hear them singing around their fire. Old folk songs, sometimes bawdy, sometimes beautiful. You can't understand all the words, but you get the meaning. Music and food, small rebellions against the inhumanity around you. And then there's the wine. They carry it in unlabelled glass bottles or sloshing tin flasks, passing it around with a wink and a toast. One evening you're offered a sip and take it, dry, earthy and probably mixed with rainwater, but unmistakably wine. There's something both heartwarming and tragic about drinking claret in a muddy clearing, surrounded by barbed wire and ruined trees. You wonder if somewhere a French vineyard is still producing these bottles, uncorked by muddy hands instead of waiters in prison cafes. Of course, not everything is romantic. The French rations, while better tasting, aren't immune to the ravages of war. Supply shortages mean some men go days with only dried beans and hard bread. There are weeks when even cheese disappears, and the stew is more water than sustenance. When desperation hits, even French soldiers resort to boiling boots for broth, same as everyone else. One particularly strange delicacy makes the rounds in stories: a stew made with roasted crow, caught by snaring the bold trench-picking birds that hover like feathered ghouls. It's tough, stringy, and allegedly tastes like bitter shoe leather, but it fills the pot and the belly. A few Frenchmen swear by it, though the look on their faces says otherwise. Still, there's no denying their food is different. Better. Not always in quality, but in spirit. You see it in the way they cook, even under fire. One man proudly tends to a frying pan over a tiny stove made from a shell casing. Another stirs coffee grounds into a battered kettle, while shells rumble in the distance. There's no panic, no grim detachment, just this stubborn belief that eating should still feel human, even here. There's even an open debate among military analysts about whether the French focus on meals contributed to their endurance. While British troops wrote home about the cold and the slop, French letters often mention meals, small joys shared among brothers. Some scholars argue this attention to food helped preserve their sense of identity. Others say it was just a byproduct of culture, one that happened to give them a mental edge years, and you return to your unit with a full belly and a little more life in your limbs. You're not ashamed to admit it. You actually smile that night. For the first time in weeks, the knot in your gut loosens. You feel human again. You joke with your mates, share what little you brought back, and sit quietly as one man carves something into the stock of his rifle. A loaf of bread and a wedge of cheese, drawn with the reverence most reserved for saints. Before sleep, you reach into your kit and fish out the hard biscuit you saved from the last British ration. You look at it, then without a second thought, you hurl it into the dark. It lands with a satisfying thunk. You roll over and close your eyes, dreaming not of home, not of the war's end, but of soup, cheese, and the scent of wine-soaked onions drifting through the trenches like a prayer. You've been hearing things about the German trenches, not from official reports, but through whispers, captured letters, the odd conversation with a prisoner under guard. You expected more or less the same miserable diet, bread bricks, meat paste, and meals better left uneaten. But what you discover when you finally get a glimpse is unsettling. The German army doesn't just feed its soldiers, it organises them like a well-oiled machine complete with a nutritional blueprint. And they've built that machine around two pillars, sausage and bread. You first catch sight of it during a prisoner escort detail. A small group of captured German infantry, muddy, tired, but oddly well fed, are huddled together on the edge of your lines. One of them unwraps something from a cloth napkin and takes a bite. You can't help staring. It's dark bread, firm but soft, and it smells like rye and something warm. Kommissbrot, they call it. Standard issue military bread, made from rye flour with a bit of barley or potato starch mixed in. Dense, durable, and surprisingly palatable. No maggots, no green edges. He offers you a piece. Cautiously, you take it. The crust has give, and the centre is chewy, not like the British hardtack or those stale biscuits you've come to loathe. You chew slowly. It's earthy, sour in a good way, like it came from a proper oven instead of a cursed trench. The German ration system, you've heard, is based on efficiency bordering on obsession. They've got a whole bureaucracy built around feeding the army, down to the daily protein intake. It's all very German. Each soldier is issued bread, sausage, Mettwurst or Blutwurst, depending on the region, dried vegetables, tinned meats, and that black coffee substitute made from roasted grains. Ersatzkaffee, they call it. Ersatz everything, really. Ersatz butter, ersatz jam, ersatz eggs, and if it can be faked and rationed, they'll fake it. And yet, somehow, it's still better than what you've been choking down. The sausages, smoked and spiced, hold up well into the mud and cold. They don't rot as fast, and they don't seem to come with the same charming ecosystem of maggots you've come to expect. The Germans even pack theirs in waxed paper or tin tubes, like engineers thinking about portability instead of just punishment. One German soldier tells you, through broken English and gestures, that his rations come every other day, like clockwork. It's not glamorous, but it's predictable. They have mobile bakeries on rails and giant field kitchens staffed by uniformed cooks who actually trained for. This, you almost laugh when you hear it. Back home, they train you to kill. In Germany, they train men to make cabbage stew with military precision. Of course, that order is starting to crack. With the war dragging on and the British blockade tightening its grip, German food supplies are being strangled. You've heard stories of turnip bread. When grain runs short, they mash root vegetables into the dough. Nutritional, yes, but not exactly satisfying. There's even a joke going around that German soldiers have started naming their rats after vegetables, because that's all they're eating anymore. The bread remains consistent, though. The dark rye loaf is a cultural cornerstone, and despite shortages, it keeps showing up. You hear rumours of secret flour shipments from occupied territories, Belgium, Poland, smuggled in to keep the supply line alive. Some historians argue that German bread logistics were more carefully planned than their actual trench strategies. You wouldn't be surprised. Back in your own trench, you share your experience. There's envy, sure, but also suspicion. Too good to be true, one man grumbles. They're probably biking it with something. Others just look tired and hungry and try to picture a world where food doesn't come in dented tins or taste like rusted tinfoil. Later, during a brief truce for prisoner exchange, you catch another glimpse of the German trench line. It's not wildly different from yours, same mud, same stench, but near the rear you see a stove, an actual stove. It's belching smoke and someone's stirring a pot over it. You're close enough to smell it. Something rich, maybe cabbage and onion, maybe meat. You almost want to cross over and ask for the recipe, and you've heard that before the war Germany had some of the most advanced food science in Europe. Their army ration system was born from years of industrial planning, machines to cut bread loaves with mathematical precision, sausage factories dedicated to the war effort, and even nutrition scientists advising the general staff. There's a famous case, though you're not sure how true it is, where a German colonel had an entire battalion's diet. He was redesigned to maximise digestion and combat stamina. He claimed it improved performance by 12%, yet you'd settle for something that didn't cause heartburn for 4 days. But here's the darker truth. That precision has limits. The deeper the war goes, the more the Germans feel the squeeze. You begin to hear reports of malnutrition, of bread rations shrinking, of meat being replaced by questionable fats. In one captured diary, a German officer writes about men boiling old leather for broth. Same as the French, same as you. No matter how efficient the system, war is a slow hunger. Still, that doesn't erase the fact that for the first 2 years, at least, the Germans ate well. Better than you did. And they did it with coordination, planning, and a stubborn belief that even sausages could be strategic. There's even a fringe theory, floated by some eccentric old professor turned trench philosopher, that Germany's early battlefield dominance wasn't just about tactics or technology, but food. They fought with full bellies, he'd muttered once over a mess tin of cold potatoes. And full bellies fight longer. You're not sure if it's true, but as you gnaw on your second stale biscuit of the day, watching a rat drag a used teabag into a dugout, it's a theory that sticks. You're back in the firing line now, and everything smells like wet wool and fear. The trench walls are a mosaic of mud and mould, patched with sandbags and old boards that groan under their own weight. It's here, ankle deep in cold muck, that you unwrap your daily ration and discover a familiar some horror. Chalk bread. It's not officially called that, of course. The army would never use a word like chalk. On paper, it's just standard issue bread, or ration loaf type number 4. But in your mouth, it's unmistakable, dry, powdery, with the strange aftertaste of something that once belonged on a school blackboard. You chew slowly, swallowing hard, hoping your digestive system won't file an official protest. And all the while, you think, this used to be food, now it's just filler. You heard it from a supply corporal once, how flour shortages led to stretching the mix with powdered lime or actual ground chalk in some batches, not everywhere, not all the time, but enough to make you question every bite. Some say it's harmless, just a way to bulk up loaves without cutting into precious grain reserves. Others whisper about stomach ulcers and tooth damage. You believe all of it. And so do your mates. One bloke tries to toast his ration over a match flame just to dry it out. Another crumbles his into water and calls it trench porridge. He sprinkles in a little salt and cocoa powder from a long-gone care package. It still tastes like disappointment. Then there are the rats. You've stopped fearing them. Now you study them. They know things. They're survivors. All was ahead of the curve. When a new shipment of bread arrives, you watch what the rats do. If they avoid it, so do you. If they fight over it, maybe it's not so bad. Today they're eating the chalk bread like it's cake. That's not comforting. Later, a runner arrives with a crate from behind the lines. Everyone circles in like vultures. Inside, tins of army chocolate. British issue, hard as stone, bitter as betrayal. It's meant to boost morale, packed with caffeine and sugar, the way a battery jump starts a dying engine. But calling it chocolate feels generous. It's technically cocoa-based. You suck on a corner and wait 5 minutes for it to melt enough to chew. Still, it's something. The sweetness punches a hole through the mud-thick taste that's been haunting your tongue since breakfast. Chocolate has a strange power out here. A single square can shift a man's mood. You once saw 2 grown soldiers nearly fight over the last piece in a tin. Then they sat down, split it in silence, and cried. No shame in it. Out here, emotions sneak up on you when you're least ready. There's a story passed down from the older lads about a time when someone found a tin of chocolate from the Queen's Own Reserve. Rich, smooth, real milk chocolate. No chalk, no bitterness, just actual decadence. They say it was hidden under a bunk in a field hospital unopened. The man who found it shared it with no one. Died 2 days later in a shelling. Some say the chocolate's still there, sealed in tin, waiting. You get 1 bar, barely enough to taste. You tuck it away in your coat, saving it for a bad day. A worse day, you correct yourself. Because there's no such thing as a good one anymore. Only variations of bearable. The chalk bread makes another appearance at dinner, this time soaked in greasy broth and served as stuffing. You chew mechanically. The broth's meat content is questionable. Thin strips of something, maybe pork, maybe ambition. You think about the chalk again, how it's technically calcium. Someone once claimed it's good for bones. You hope that's true because your joints ache like they're rusting from the inside. There's some debate about just how widespread the use of chalk or filler was in wartime bread. Some historians argue it was rare, a wartime exaggeration fueled by soldier folklore. Others insist that during the worst supply shortages, almost every loaf had something mixed in. You lean toward the latter, mostly because you've eaten it. Then just when you're about to wrap up the day in grim silence, a new sound breaks the monotony. Singing. A ragged chorus rises from the French trench a few dozen meters to the left. You don't understand the lyrics, but the tune is oddly familiar. Something about it cuts through the haze in your brain. It reminds you of home, of warm kitchens and actual meals, of clean sheets and dry feet. You close your eyes and let it wash over you the way wind moves through wheat. The rats grow bolder at night. You hear them scurrying over crates, rustling in canvas sacks, even brushing your boots. You can't sleep with your bread in your pack, they'll chew right through. One guy keeps his wrapped in wire mesh like some sort of anti-rat safe. Another stores his in a sock under his helmet and wears it all night. The rats get it anyway. And yet, despite all of it, the chalk, the rodents, the gut-turning stew, you eat. Because hunger trumps disgust every time. You keep chewing, keep swallowing. You lie to yourself that tomorrow's batch might be better. That maybe someone in a rear tent will realise that ground limestone isn't really food. And sometimes, though, you let yourself dream of better meals. You close your eyes and picture thick slices of real bread, warm and soft, with a smear of butter that doesn't come from a tin. You imagine cocoa that melts instantly, sweet and creamy, in a warm tin mug held between clean hands. You remember the idea of food, back when it meant more than just survival. Then the wind picks up, carrying the stink of latrines and cordite, and you're back in the trench, chewing on chalk, waiting for dawn. The morning starts with silence, which is never a good sign. No shells, no rifles, not even birds. Just stillness. You know from experience that this kind of quiet usually means someone, somewhere, is making a very loud plan. You sit on the fire step, ration tin in hand, staring into the fog like it might suddenly part and show you home. Then the whispers begin. Nothing official, just trench gossip mutating down the line. There's talk of supply lines being hit, a blown bridge, a German advance slicing off a convoy. Whatever the truth is, one thing's certain, the food isn't coming. Not today, maybe not tomorrow either. And just like that, the worst word in the trenches spreads like a virus. Shortage. You've been hungry before, not the kind of hunger that comes from skipping lunch. The kind that makes your jaw ache, your hands tremble, your brain dull at the edges like a fogged-up mirror. It's the kind of hunger that turns men into animals. And this time it's not just you, it's everyone. Lunch is a slice of bread so thin you can see daylight through it, and a single scoop of stew that's mostly water with a few unidentifiable root vegetables bobbing like shipwreck survivors. The cook, usually gruff and full of sarcasm, doesn't even look up as he ladles it out. He just mutters, "Stretch it, don't ask." By mid-afternoon, tempers start to fray. Two men nearly come to blows over a smear of marmalade. Another punches a wall when he finds a biscuit tin already raided. Your own stomach twists and growls like a wounded animal. You try to ignore it, try to sleep, try to read a page from a crumpled letter from home, but the words blur and fade behind your hunger. There's an ugly truth here that no one wants to say out loud. Hunger can be a weapon, not just the slow, creeping kind that haunts civilians on the home front. You've seen armies starve each other with more precision than bullets, cut the lines, bomb the convoys, poison the wells. It's quiet, slow, and devastating. You remember reading somewhere in training that the Germans had a word for it. Kale frass, bear eating, stripping an area of everything edible. You're seeing it now. The trench, once lined with half-eaten tins and scattered crumbs, has been picked clean. Even the rats seem leaner, faster, more desperate. Someone down the trench begins boiling nettles. You hadn't even known they were edible. He says his grandmother taught him, during the potato blight. The smell is bitter and green, like a garden that's given up. You watch him slurp it with the reverence of a man enjoying the finest soup in France. You trade him 2 cigarettes for a mugful. It burns your tongue and tastes like boiled lawn, but you drink every drop and desperation makes you inventive. A few soldiers start foraging during patrols, grabbing whatever they can from the ruined fields between lines. Wild onions, turnips, sometimes berries. One brings back a pigeon, half roasted on a bayonet over a small spirit stove. He guards it like treasure, and eats it alone, crouched in his corner of the dugout with a haunted look in his eye. And then there are the unspoken rules. You don't take from another man's mess kit, you don't lie about having extra rations, and you absolutely don't steal from a comrade. But rules bend under pressure. You start noticing food going missing. A biscuit here, a slice of meat there. Someone's hoarding, someone else is bartering in secret. The whole trench turns into a slow, paranoid swirl of suspicion. You keep your own rations close, even though there's barely anything left. One crumbled biscuit in a tin, a smear of jam on a ragged crust of bread. You tuck it under your coat when you sleep, next to your chest, guarded like a secret. There's a story floating around, might be true, might be trench myth, about a regiment that went 3 days without food and finally turned on itself. Nothing dramatic, just men slipping away in the night with packs that weren't theirs. One man was found with 8 biscuit tins under his bedroll. Another was caught boiling shoe leather and calling it beef. The officer tried to restore order with promises that supplies were coming, but morale collapsed. Half the men ended up reassigned. A few just disappeared. You can see how it happens. Hunger changes everything. It makes you forget why you're fighting, who you're fighting, even who you are. It shrinks the war down to a single question. What can I eat next? And yet somehow you keep going. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's habit, maybe it's that little scrap of chocolate you keep tucked in your kit, untouched, waiting. You think about opening it just to get through the night, but you stop yourself. You whisper a quiet threat to anyone, or anything that tries to touch it while you sleep. Historians later argued whether supply shortages were intentional strategy or just mismanagement. Some claim High Command underestimated the complexity of feeding millions across a landscape churned into chaos. Others suggest it was calculated, cutting off food to soften enemy morale before a major push. There's no clear answer. All you know is that here, at this moment, food is not just fuel, it's a reason to keep breathing. When dusk settles in, someone passes around a flask with something sharp and burning in it. Not rum or not brandy, maybe homemade. You take a swig and feel it light up your throat. It does nothing to quiet your stomach, but it dulls the ache in your ribs. That's good enough. You sleep curled tight around your coat as if your body can feed off its own heat. Your dreams are full of tables, loaves of bread, roast chicken, hot soup that never cools. You wake with your stomach louder than the morning shelling. There's still no food truck, no crate, just another whisper. Maybe tomorrow. The rumour comes by way of a corporal with mud on his chin and a voice like gravel. Field kitchens moving up. You don't believe it at first. Sounds like one of those morale-boosting lies officers tell when morale is scraping the floor. But then you hear it. A faint clatter. The rhythmic clang of ladles against steel. A metal-on-metal percussion so familiar and so far removed from the war's usual soundtrack of gunfire and screaming. You crane your neck over the trench wall and catch a glimpse. 2 covered wagons, horses struggling through the muck, trailing thin columns of smoke. Field kitchen. You climb up for a better look, and for the first time in what feels like years, you smell actual cooking. Not stew in a tin, not damp biscuits. Cooking, onion, grease, maybe even garlic. You can't tell if it's real or if your brain's playing some cruel joke, but your mouth starts watering instantly. The cook, a man known only as Butterfield, wheels the stove into place, grinning like he's just won the lottery. He's wearing a soot-streaked apron and a cap that might once have been white. The field kitchen is a mobile monstrosity, half cart, half cauldron, pulled by draft horses and powered by fire, sweat, and whatever ingredients survived the supply route. You hover close, pretending not to stare. Butterfield raises the lid on one of the great black kettles, and steam bursts out in a glorious hiss, curling upward into the mist. The smell confirms it. This is food with intent. You catch a glimpse of carrots, leeks, and something that might be lamb, maybe goat. Doesn't matter. It's meat. Real meat. There's colour in it. Depth. Soul. Field kitchens like this one are miracles of logistics and stubbornness. Dragged from position to position, often across open ground, through artillery zones and sniper ranges, just to serve up something hot to starving men. The cooks who run them are a different breed, equal parts brave, mad, and essential. They're often overlooked, not glamorous enough to write home about, but you learn quickly that the man who controls the ladle holds more power than most lieutenants. Butterfield doesn't rush. He stirs, tastes, adjusts, mutters to himself, then finally starts calling men forward. You line up behind 30 others, trying not to trample the one in front of you. Your stomach is twisting itself into knots, growling loud enough for the man behind you to hear. "Haven't eaten this well since I joined," he mutters. "If they feed us like this tomorrow, I'll volunteer to storm Berlin." When it's finally your turn, Butterfield ladles a steaming scoop into your tin mess bowl. The stew is thick and golden, filled with chunks of root veg and strips of something that flakes under your spoon. He drops a hunk of bread on top, not hardtack, but actual soft bread. Slightly burned on one edge, but still spongy in the middle. You hold the bowl like it's made of glass and step back, just in case this all turns out to be a fever dream. The first bite makes you close your eyes. It's salty, rich, and spicy in a way that hits the back of your throat. Maybe it's pepper, maybe it's whatever Butterfield found at the last supply depot. It doesn't matter. You chew slowly, savouring every grain of meat, every soaked bit of bread. For the first time in weeks, you're eating something that wasn't born in a tin. The others around you are doing the same, heads down, chewing like monks at a sacred ritual. Field kitchens, you realise, do more than feed. They tether you to something normal, something safe. The rumble of the stove, the scrape of the ladle, the hiss of boiling water. It's like music from a world before the war. You remember hearing that the Germans had similar setups, mobile soup kitchens that could serve thousands in a day. Some were even rail-mounted. Efficiency, of course. But this feels like care. You ask Butterfield what's in the stew. He grins, missing one tooth, and says, "Whatever didn't crawl away fast enough." Then he hands you a scorched, folded recipe card with handwriting too neat for a man who lives in fire and grease. On it, Trench Surprise serves 150. Ingredients include some meat, a lot of potato, lesser root vegetables, and pepper if you're lucky. The last line reads, "Optional, prayer." Later, a letter from home arrives. You sit with your back against the dugout wall, full for once, and read about your brother's new job, your mother's latest worry, and how the cat has taken. To sleeping in your older bed. You smile at the line even though it stings. Then you carefully fold the letter and tuck it into your coat right next to the recipe card. Night falls and the cold returns, but it's easier to face with something warm in your belly. You pass the field kitchen again on your way to stand to. Butterfield's asleep, curled up under a canvas flap, a spoon still in one hand. The stove embers glow faintly in the dark. A beacon of civilization amid the ruin. There's a scholarly argument floating around, one you heard from the chaplain who used to teach philosophy, about how civilization can be measured by how it feeds its people, even in war. Not just if it feeds them, but how. Field kitchens, then, are more than logistics. They're a statement. We still care about the men we send to die, but not all is perfect. You've heard of field kitchens blown apart by shell fire, entire meal wagons turned into scrap metal and bone, cooks killed before the stew ever reached the trenches, and yet they keep coming, keep risking it, keep ladling hope into tin bowls. Before bed, you share a crust with the man beside you. He offers you half a cigarette in return. You sit in silence, chewing slowly, the stew still warming your insides, the cigarette smoke curling around your head like a lullaby. And for one brief, impossible moment, the war slips away. You fall asleep to the sound of pots clanking and water boiling in the dark. You wake up to rain so fine it feels like the air itself is leaking. The trench smells like soaked leather and iron, the scent of rusted weapons and sodden boots rising in waves. There's talk of a new stew in the works, different from yesterday's miracle at the field kitchen. No Butterfield, no mobile stove wheel through the muck. This time it's trench stew, also known by its many less flattering names. Slop, death soup, last rites ragout. Trench stew is the great equaliser. Every man's had it. Every man's tried to forget it. The basic recipe goes like this. Take whatever is left, boil it until unrecognisable, and hope it doesn't fight back. One private claims there's a system, a rotation. Monday is potato and bully beef. Tuesday, turnip and biscuit bits. Wednesday, if you have to ask, you're already too late. You approach the cook fire, which is barely more than a sputtering flame shielded by metal sheeting. The stew is cooking in what was once a shell casing, now blackened with use. You glance into the pot and immediately regret it. Floating in the brownish liquid is a suspicious cube of meat, or maybe sponge, and a few pale slices of what might be parsnip or might be something else entirely. The liquid bubbles as if warning you. They hand you a tin cupful. You don't say thank you. No one does. Gratitude feels misplaced when what you're about to eat looks like something that backed out of a latrine. You sip it. The taste is complicated and not in a good way. Salty, bitter, and oddly sweet in places where no sweetness should be. The beef is overboiled to the point of disintegration, and the vegetables are just memories held together by broth. Still, it's warm. You tell yourself that matters. The thing about trench stew is it changes constantly because the ingredients change constantly. Some days it's almost good, if there's a fresh carrot or a splash of real fat to thicken it. Other days it's punishment in a cup. You remember one morning when someone found a lump of what turned out to be horse meat. The cook diced it, tossed it in the pot and said nothing. It was the best stew you ever had. Another time someone added tea instead of water. That one went badly. And then there's the bread. It comes with the stew like a bad memory. Today's slice is extra stale, half frozen, and you have to soak it in the broth to even get a bite through it. It melts like mush in your mouth, which is either helpful or horrifying depending on how much you're paying attention. Despite everything, there's a strange comfort in the routine. Lining up, receiving your ladleful, retreating to your corner of the trench like an animal with a kill. Eating with your fingers when your spoon is gone. Letting the heat spread through your chest, even if the flavour turns your stomach. Someone once called it roulette stew. You never know what you're going to get, and odds are it won't sit right. Men have told tales of finding buttons, wire, even a spent cartridge casing in their portion. The cooks swear it's not intentional, but no one really believes that. You find a shard of something today, bone, wood, you spit it out and keep chewing. The debate over the origins of trench stew rages on. Was it a British invention, a necessity cooked up by overburdened quartermasters? Or did it evolve naturally, like mould, from the fact that nothing was ever in good supply all at once? Some historians suggest it became a shared ritual across all armies. French, German, British, even American, when they finally joined in. Everyone had a version. Everyone hated it. Everyone needed it. Fringe theories crop up now and then. One chap insisted the army deliberately made the stew unpleasant to lower expectations. "Keep the lads humble," he said. "You can't complain about morale if nobody remembers what hope tastes like." You laugh at that bitterly. Not because it's funny, because it might actually be true. In a moment of clarity, you try to list what's in your current bowl. Potato for sure. A chunk of turnip that didn't cook through. Something stringy that might be cabbage. And the meat. You decide not to dwell on it. It could be from anything with legs. As long as it doesn't move on its own, it counts. One man pours half his stew into a mess tin lid and lets it cool, then slices it into quarters and calls it trench pie. Another crumbles a biscuit into his, sprinkles salt and mutters, "Gourmet." You'd laugh, but you're too busy chewing. Later that night, after stand to, you lie back on your muddy blanket and feel your stomach twist. Not violently, just enough to remind you that the stew's fighting for dominance. The latrine queue gets longer as the stew makes its slow journey through the collective digestive tract of the unit. You remember a man, Evans from Glasgow, who once refused his stew entirely. Called it an insult to digestion. Tried to live off biscuits and tea for 4 days. By day 5, he passed out on patrol and had to be hauled back to the trench, pale and delirious. Since then, he's been first in line for every ladle. You still have the taste in your mouth when you finally drift off to sleep. It's not pleasant. It never is. But it's familiar, and in a place where nothing feels safe, that counts for something. Tomorrow's stew will be different. Worse, maybe. Better, maybe. You'll eat it anyway. That's trench life. You don't eat because you're hungry, you eat because it's there, and because not eating means weakness. And weakness doesn't survive long here. You're supposed to be on rest duty, but rest is a joke when your stomach sounds like a trapped animal. Supplies are late again, and the cook has resorted to boiling soup bones that have already been boiled 3 times this week. The water tastes like regret, and the smell alone is making you question every life decision you've made since enlisting. That's when the idea hits. We go get our own food. You and a few others, all equally hollow-eyed and reckless, form a sort of unspoken raiding party. Not against the enemy, but against nature, or farms, or whatever's left of either. Foraging is officially frowned upon. Officers call it unauthorized requisition. But out here, everyone knows the truth. If it's not nailed down and isn't moving too fast, it is fair game. You slip out under the cover of early dusk, heading toward the edge of a shattered French village, just beyond the reserve line. It's been shelled to hell and back, brick piles and broken fences, skeletal trees blackened by fire. But farms used to exist here. Orchards, gardens, chickens if you're lucky. You keep your eyes peeled. The first prize comes when Morris, the quiet one, finds a row of half-dead cabbages clinging to life beside what used to be a barn. You pick 2 and stuff them into a canvas sack. They're limp and riddled with bugs, but they're green, and that's worth more than gold. Further on, you spot a crumbling root cellar. The wooden door is half buried under dirt and ash, but you pry it open to find a handful of shriveled carrots and, miracle of miracles, a sack of onions. You nearly cry. Then come the chickens. You hear them first. A soft cluck, barely audible over the wind. You freeze, look around, and then you see them. 3 scraggly hens pecking around a collapsed fence post. No human in sight. You and Murphy dive for them like lunatics, feathers flipping. There's a lot of cursing, one gets away, but 2 end up in your hands, squawking in outrage. You don't feel heroic, you feel desperate. There's an open debate back in the trenches, whether foraging is brave, smart, or borderline criminal. Some say it's resourceful, others call it stealing. The line blurs fast in war. If a farm's abandoned, whose food is it now? You're not looting, you're surviving, and the difference out here feels semantic. You make your way back with your haul. 2 chickens, 4 cabbages, half a dozen carrots, a pile of onions, and 1 small sack of flour found in a burnt-out bakery. The flour's grey, smells faintly smoky, but it's still flour. When you arrive back at the trench, the cook's eyes go wide. He doesn't ask questions, just takes it all and mutters, "Bloody hell, it's Christmas." You help pluck the chickens. It's messier than you thought. Feathers get everywhere, sticking to your damp sleeves. One of the birds has mites. You pretend not to notice. The cook adds chopped onion, carrot, cabbage, and the mystery flour to a battered cauldron, and suddenly something magical happens. The pot starts to smell like food. Real food. Even the rats poke their heads out, curious. That night's meal is a stew thicker than any you've had since arrival. The broth clings to the spoon. The chicken falls apart into tender strips. The carrots still have crunch. You eat slowly, savouring every bite like it's the Last Supper. There's even something like bread. Dumplings made from the flour, dropped into the pot and boiled into chewy lumps. You could weep. This, you think, is the high point of trench cuisine. Not because it's elegant, or even good, but because you made it happen. You went out, dodged snipers and shell holes, and came back with dinner. There's a fringe rumour that some officers used to forage too, but sent their orderlies instead. One legend tells of a lieutenant who found a goat, smuggled it into the trench, and kept it hidden for weeks as a personal milk source. Eventually the men got wind of it and staged an unofficial court-martial for hoarding dairy. You sit beside the fire with your belly full, rubbing the grease from your fingers into your sleeves. Across the trench, someone's carving a chicken bone into the shape of a whistle. Another guy, clearly inspired by dinner, starts humming a hymn from childhood. You'd join him, but you're too busy savouring the aftertaste of real food. There's a cost to everything, though. The chickens brought mites. Your neck itches all night. You suspect one of the onions was bad, judging by the digestive symphony coming from the latrine pit. And there's always the chance that someone higher up will find out you left the line without orders. But none of that matters when your stomach is full. You lie back in the dugout, hands behind your head, watching the stars appear one by one. For once, your dreams aren't of home or peace or escape. They're of chickens, onions, carrots, of not being afraid to take what you need. Because in this war, no one gives you anything, not really. You have to find it, steal it, grow it if you can, and when you do, when you bring back even the smallest victory from the dead land beyond the wire, you remember who you were before the mud and the shells and the endless stew. A man who could make something good, even if it's only dinner. You hear your name shouted from across the trench. A bundle sails through the air and lands with a wet thwack in your lap. It's wrapped in wax paper and tied with fraying twine. Your breath catches. A parcel from home. You pause just for a moment, holding it like it might disappear if you blink. Then your fingers tear through the string like a starving dog with a sausage. Inside, there's a note, folded twice, smudged with what might be flour or tears. It's from your sister. The handwriting's uneven, like she was in a rush. She says she baked something special, something you used to beg for when you were a lad. You dig deeper into the parcel and find it, a lumpy, crumbling cake wrapped in oilcloth and optimism. You stare at it like it's a slice of heaven. Everyone crowds around, pretending not to care, but they all do. Parcel envy is the one emotion shared equally among soldiers. You break off a piece and sniff it. It's dense, dark, studded with raisins or maybe currants, and smells faintly of nutmeg, or at least something pretending to be nutmeg. It's half crushed and more than a little mouldy on one side, but your mouth waters anyway. You offer it around. That's the unspoken rule. When someone shares cake in a trench, it's not about generosity. It's about not dying with a face full of crumbs while your mates look on. Everyone takes a small bite, reverent, chewing in silence like it's communion. The sweetness hits hard after weeks of salt and tin. One guy closes his eyes and just nods, slowly. Another wipes his mouth like he's savouring fine wine. It's over in less than a minute. There's also a tin of jam, buried at the bottom of the parcel like treasure. Raspberry, homemade. You open it with your bayonet, and lick the blade clean without a trace of shame. Then you dip a biscuit into it, a real army biscuit, chalky and stiff, and let it soak for a second before biting down. It's not exactly cake, but for one strange moment, you could be back in your mother's kitchen. Letters from home are food too, in their own way. They feed something deeper. After you've eaten, you unfold the note again and read it slowly. Your sister talks about the new neighbours, about how your old cat still refuses to sleep anywhere but your bed. She says she's saving the best tea for when you come home, and you smile even though you know she's lying. It'll be gone by winter. Tea doesn't last. She writes about a blackout drill and how Gran fell into a ditch trying to get to the shelter. You laugh out loud at that and someone gives you a look like you've gone mad. Maybe you have, but it feels good to laugh, to remember that the world still exists beyond the mud. There's a debate about parcels, especially cakes. Some say it's cruel, that by the time anything reaches you it's so ruined by damp and mould that it's worse than nothing. Others argue it's a lifeline. Even a lump of stale fruitcake is proof someone out there remembers your name. One guy claims his mum sent him a pork pie that turned green by the time he had arrived. Another swears he once got a whole roast chicken. No one believes him. Another story goes around about a man who received a bottle of brandy cleverly disguised in a hot water bottle. He shared it, then passed out under a tarp for 18 hours. Legend: you wrap the leftover cake in cloth and tuck it deep into your pack even though it's already beginning to sweat. You're saving it for tomorrow or maybe the next time you feel like you're losing the plot, which could be any minute now. Later that night, you write a reply in a borrowed pencil stub scribbling on the back of a folded map. You thank your sister for the cake, exaggerate a little about how good it was, and make up a few cheerful details she'll never be able to check. You tell her you're fine, that the officers are treating you well, that the weather's improving. None of it's true, not really, but lies taste better than honesty when written from a hole in the ground. There's a darker side to it though, something you try not to dwell on. The parcels that don't arrive, the families that send letters week after week into the void, not knowing their son's been gone for months. One man received 3 parcels in a row, all addressed to his twin brother. He opened them anyway, said it felt like being alive again just for a moment. Some letters are opened by censors before they reach you. Whole paragraphs blacked out, inked over. The censors say it's to protect morale, to keep troop movements secret. But sometimes it just feels like erasure. Like someone's shaving down your connection to the outside world until it fits their version of the war. But not tonight. Tonight, you have cake, you have jam, you have a letter with your name on it, and for once, it feels like enough. You share the last bites of the jam with the new guy, fresh-faced, nervous, still writing mother at the top of every letter. He's never tasted raspberry jam before. He says it's too sweet. You laugh at that. One day he'll miss even this. You sleep with the parcel tucked under your coat like a pillow, the scent of nutmeg and old paper curling around you. The rats are quieter tonight. Or maybe they're just full. Either way, you rest easier. Because for once you're not eating to survive, you're eating to remember who you are. It starts with a sound you haven't heard in weeks. Singing. Soft, scattered, almost hesitant at first. A few bars of a familiar carol, Silent Night maybe, drifting from the German lines across no man's land. You sit up in the dugout confused. No gunfire, no mortar whines, just voices, clear and strange, carried on the frozen December air. A few lads near you pause mid-card game, cards in hand, listening like they've just caught a ghost. Someone down the trench whispers, "It's Christmas Eve." You'd forgotten. Dates stop meaning much after the first few bombardments. Time out here stretches and folds in on itself like a crumpled map. but now with the chill so sharp it bites your teeth and your breath fogging in the moonlight. The idea of Christmas hits you like a shovel to the chest. More voices join the song from the German side, stronger now, deliberate. You catch snatches of harmony, and though you don't speak the language, you know the song. Others around you start humming along, some half laughing, others looking like they might cry. Someone picks up the tune and sings in English. Another joins in, and then, impossibly, you hear it. Applause, from both sides. You expect it to end there, maybe a fluke, some mad musical fever dream, but then you see it. Flickers of candlelight along the German parapet. Tiny flames glowing like stars placed atop makeshift Christmas trees. Scrapwood and barbed wire twisted into hopeful shapes. There's movement in the dark. Shadows. Then a voice, clear and heavily accented, shouts, "We not shoot, you not shoot!" A tense silence follows. Rifles stay low but ready. And then someone, Murphy of course, climbs halfway up the trench wall and waves. You want to shout at him, but instead you watch in disbelief as a German soldier does the same, hands up, unarmed. This is how the ceasefire begins. No orders, no strategy, just men cold and starved and far from home just deciding they've had enough killing for one night. What happens next is something you'd never believe if you weren't living it. Men begin climbing from the trenches, carefully at first, as if expecting the air itself to bite. You follow, slowly, boots crunching over frozen mud and shell holes, until you find yourself standing in no man's land. And then you see them, German soldiers, just a few feet away, holding out tins, bottles, even loaves of dark bread. You hesitate, then reach forward. A bottle changes hands. Cheap schnapps, sharp and sour, but warmer than rum. A packet of cigarettes is offered in exchange for a bar of soap. One man hands over a tinned sausage. You give him 2 army biscuits and a scrap of jam. It's absurd, beautifully absurd. Within minutes, the ground between trenches is dotted with clusters of enemies, talking, laughing, sharing food like old friends at a picnic in hell. You bite into the sausage and nearly moan. It's spiced, rich, and tastes like actual meat. Not mystery meat. Not despair compressed into a tin. Real food. The kind that reminds you have a tongue and a soul. A German private offers you a chunk of rye bread, and you hand him a small square of chocolate from your last parcel. He doesn't speak English, and you don't speak German, but you nodded at each other like diplomats brokering a treaty over snacks. Someone has a harmonica. Another has a dented fiddle. Music erupts again. Carols, folk tunes, even a few dirty songs. A few men try to organise a football match with a flattened canteen cover. It turns into a chaotic kickfest that ends with a collision and roars of laughter in multiple languages. No one brought a feast. This isn't a banquet. It's bits and scraps, the bottom of the food barrel from both sides. But it feels like a banquet because it's shared. A bite of sausage from a stranger becomes a kind of communion. A dry biscuit dipped in someone else's broth becomes a bridge. There's an ongoing debate about how widespread these ceasefires actually were. Some historians say it happened only in scattered places. Others insist it was common across vast stretches of the Western Front, at least for a day or two. There's even fringe speculation, probably nonsense, that High Command deliberately underreported it to avoid inspiring further disobedience. After all, what could be more threatening to a war than soldiers realising they don't want to kill each other? You overhear a German soldier say something like, "Meine Mutter macht besser," gesturing at the sausage. His mate laughs and slaps him on the back. You laugh too, though you barely understand. You pull out the last of your jam and offer it to the group. They pass it around, nodding with approval, and one of them actually kisses the tin. The moon climbs higher. Someone starts carving names into a shell casing, yours, a few Germans, initials in place of names. You toss a few buttons into the mix. They give you a badge from their tunic. Keepsakes exchanged like family at Christmas. And then, just as quietly as it began, the magic starts to fade. A crack of distant gunfire reminds everyone that the war hasn't ended, just paused. Officers begin calling men back to the lines, gently at first, then more sternly. One by one, men begin to drift away, backs turned, heads low. You shake hands with a young German soldier no older than yourself. He says something you don't understand, but his voice is soft and his eyes are tired. You nod and he nods, and then you both disappear back into your own walls of mud. That night, back in the trench, you unwrap the bit of sausage you saved. You eat it slowly, eyes closed, trying to hold on to the taste. You can hear someone nearby humming a carol, low and slow. No one's talking, even the rats seem hushed. Tomorrow, you know it'll go back to normal, the shelling, the shouting, the rations. But tonight, for one strange holy moment, you ate with your enemy and didn't die. You're sent to headquarters for a day, not because of heroism or injury or anything worth celebrating. You're just chosen, randomly it seems, to carry a message down the line. Scrap of paper in an envelope, as if they haven't figured out phones yet. It's supposed to be a short trip, just a walk through support trenches and rear lines, but it feels like crossing into another world. One where the mud is a little less clingy and the air doesn't immediately try to kill you. And then you see it. The officer's mess. At first you think it's a joke, some kind of makeshift lounge, maybe a storage tent with a fancy name. But no, it's real. A canvas-covered structure with wooden floorboards, actual chairs, and a long table dressed in a white sheet that has no business being anywhere near a battlefield. Lamps flicker inside. There's even a little gramophone in the corner, humming out something jazzy and wildly inappropriate for a war zone. Someone opens the flap and steps out. He's clean-shaven, wearing a pressed uniform and smelling faintly of soap and tobacco. You suddenly become hyper-aware of the mud on your boots, the tear in your sleeve, and the fact that you haven't washed your hands in 4 days. The smell hits next, roast meat, butter, nothing spiced. It's so out of place, so outrageously good that your brain refuses to process it. You think about that last stew you choked down, grey, oily, floating with bits of things that had no business being in a bowl, and you wonder if this is even the same army. You get your answer soon enough. While you wait to deliver your message, someone offers you a cup of tea. Not the trench kind. This one's brewed in an actual teapot. It's warm, fragrant, with a splash of milk that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a goat. There's even a biscuit to go with it. Flaky, buttery, sweet. You sit on the edge of a crate, sipping, trying not to look like you're memorising every detail. Inside, the officers are seated at the table, talking casually over plates of roast beef, boiled potatoes, even peas. Real peas, green, not grey, someone's cutting into a pie. You watch the steam rise off the crust like it's a ghost. There's always been a gap, of course. Officers get better rations, that's how it works. Rank comes with perks. You knew that, but seeing it, smelling it, makes the difference feel obscene. While your mates are scrounging for carrot tops and boiling turnip skins, these men are debating the best mustard for lamb. A junior officer steps outside with a sandwich in hand. You must be staring because he stops, looks at you and then, bless him, breaks it in half and offers it. You hesitate for only a second before accepting. Roast meat, soft bread, a sliver of pickle. It's the best thing you've eaten since arriving in France. You thank him with your mouth full and he chuckles like he's just done a magic trick. There's a quiet debate among the enlisted about how officers eat. Some say it's necessary for morale, for hierarchy. Others argue it's just old-fashioned indulgence disguised as logistics. One sergeant told you, they say it's so they can think clearly. Funny how we're expected to fight clearly with half a biscuit and tea from a sock. You finish the sandwich and tuck the remaining crust into your coat for later. Back in the trench, you know it'll be a currency of sorts. You could trade it for a cigarette, or maybe even half a tin of jam. But part of you wants to hoard it, just as a reminder that real food still exists. Inside the mess tent, the officers begin toasting something, maybe a birthday, maybe a victory no one told you about. They raise glasses filled with something amber and smooth, definitely not water. Someone claps, someone laughs, the gramophone skips a beat and keeps playing. You feel like a ghost outside a party, peering in through the window. And yet, you can't entirely blame them. Not really. They live differently because they have to. They are targets in their own way. Responsibility is a heavy thing, and perhaps roast lamb and good whiskey help carry that weight. Still, it's hard not to feel the gap in your stomach as much as the one in your rank. Eventually, your message is delivered. No one opens it in front of you. Probably doesn't matter anyway. You're given a pat on the shoulder and a good man, which you accept with a nod and clenched teeth. Then you start the walk back. The ground gets muddier. The air turns colder. The smell of meat fades into damp canvas and gun oil. By the time you reach your trench again, you're covered in dirt. Someone asks where you've been. You shrug. Just errand duty. No one presses. You hand the crust of the sandwich to a lad with a bloody bandage on his leg. He doesn't ask where it came from. Just chews in silence, eyes closed. That night, as you slurp down the usual thin stew and pretend not to notice the beetle floating in it, you think about the table, the pie, the music, the lights. You don't hate the officers, not exactly. But the next time someone says we're all in this together, you'll remember that sandwich. the way it tasted like something worth living for, and the way it was gone in 2 bites. By now you've come to expect a certain flavour profile from trench cuisine, mostly metallic, aggressively bland, and faintly reminiscent of sadness. But then one morning you wake to find posters plastered all along the dugout walls, bright colours, bold letters, a British soldier, smiling too wide, lifting a tin of corned beef like it's a crown jewel. He eats well because he fights well. You laugh out loud. That's what passes for humour these days. Propaganda, of course. Food posters are everywhere now, even out here in the mud, encouraging you to enjoy your rations, as if that chalky biscuit and stringy meat stew are some kind of gourmet spread. One features a cheerful Tommy dipping hardtack into a steaming mug of tea, winking like he's in a pub. You wonder if the artist ever actually tasted trench stew, or tried gnawing on a cold lump of beef jelly while a rat watched from his boot. Back behind the lines, you once saw a propaganda display, mocked up like a cafe scene, with real china, polished cutlery, and heaping plates of roast beef, peas, and bread pudding. "Typical British Army meal," the sign read. A few of the lads burst out laughing so hard a corporal threatened to report them for insubordination. That image stuck with you. A feast of lies served cold as some of the new recruits, fresh-faced boys from the cities, actually believe the posters. For a while at least. You watch them scan the walls during meals, trying to match their bowl of beige sludge to the colourful illustrations above their heads. It never quite aligns. Eventually they stop looking. Then there's the war newsreels. A few months ago, when you were rotated behind the front, they showed one in a barn. Flickering black and white footage of troops grinning with their rations, toasting the camera with tin mugs. It was edited so neatly that you'd swear the whole war was one long picnic. No mud, no blood, just music, meals, and marching in straight lines. You tried not to gag. You understand why it's done. Morale isn't just a battlefield issue, it's a public one. Back home, families need to believe their boys are being fed, looked after, kept alive. The Ministry of Information churns out pamphlets showing balanced trench meals, with diagrams of vitamins, minerals, and colour-coded portions. It's complete fiction, but it keeps mothers sleeping at night. One of the lads jokes that they should print a real trench cookbook, recipes from the Western Front, featuring mud, mice, and misery. The ideas flow fast. Shell shock souffle, barbed wire bolognese, no man's land mincemeat. You all laugh harder than you should, because if you stop, you'll start crying instead. Every now and then someone gets creative and tries to recreate one of the fake meals. You remember when Murphy found a bit of dried apple and tried to bake a trench pie using biscuit crumbs, water and ash for flavour. It came out the colour of defeat. He offered slices around like he was running a bakery. Everyone humoured him. It tasted like broken promises. But you all said it was lovely. There's an ongoing debate in your unit. Are the posters and stage meals cruel or helpful? Some say they're a lifeline, something to aim for, even if it's fantasy. Others argue it's psychological warfare on your own side, show a starving man a feast he can't have and you're just twisting the knife. You're somewhere in the middle. You'd rather be lied to than forgotten. Sometimes you wonder how the civilians back home interpret it all. They probably think you're dining on roasts every night, washing it down with ale and singing songs around a fire. They don't see the men boiling belt leather for broth or chasing down field mice like prized game. You once read a letter aloud from a girl who asked, "Do you still get pudding on Sundays?" Half the dugout laughed. The other half just stared into the distance. Then there are the rumours. Always rumours. One goes that High Command actually holds secret dinners, just to remind themselves what real food tastes like. 5 courses, silverware, even music. Another says there's a hidden store of luxury rations somewhere near Calais, stuff meant for visiting royalty or press tours. Champagne, fresh bread, chocolate you don't need to chisel. No one's ever seen it, but you dream about it anyway. Your favourite story is about a French chef drafted into the army, who ended up running a secret trench bistro for officers. He'd forage by day and cook by night, serving wild rabbit with wine sauce, sourced from God knows where. Probably fiction, but a good fiction. You once tried to stage your own trench feast. You found a clean tin lid, wiped it off, and carefully arranged your meal. Biscuit shards, a spoonful of stew, a strip of salt pork and a lone dried prune. You set it on a box, lit a candle stump and pretended to be hosting guests, even spoke in a posh accent. "May I recommend the roast regret with a side of existential dread?" It was ridiculous, but it helped, a little. There's talk among the more cynical men that all this staged propaganda, these photos and posters, aren't for morale, they're for legacy, so that when the war ends they can claim they looked after you. They'll point to the images and say, see, we fed them well. No one will question the truth because no one will want to. You finish another meal of potato mash and rehydrated fish that smells like old boots. The cook, looking sheepish, tells you the food was delayed again. You nod. You don't blame him. He's got fewer supplies than lies in the posters. As you sit with your mess tin in your lap, you glance at the wall across the trench where the propaganda poster still flaps in the wind. The smiling soldier, rosy-cheeked and clean, lifting his spoon like a sceptre. You raise your own spoon, dripping with beige goo, and toast him. To the fiction, you mutter. May it taste better than the truth. The tin hisses when you open it, and that's never a good sign. You know the sound by now. Fresh tins pop quietly, like a polite knock at the door. But this one growls. You peel back the lid with the tip of your knife, slow and cautious, like you're diffusing something that might bite. The stench hits you instantly, sharp, sour, metallic, the unmistakable bouquet of rot mixed with despair. You gag, turning your face away. Even the rats keep their distance. This one's a dud. A lethal dud. Canned meat is supposed to be your safety net. Long shelf life sealed against the filth, immune to weather. That's the theory. The reality is different. In these conditions, mud, freezing rain, weeks of transit over cratered roads, the tins buckle, warp and sometimes burst. The food inside curdles into something halfway between soup and chemical weapon. You pitch the tin into the waste pile and light a cigarette to kill the smell. Around you a few other lads are doing the same, sniffing tins, holding them up to the light, poking at their contents with the grim curiosity of men checking a body. Someone swears loudly. He found mould inside his. Green and blue swirls, like an angry sky in a painting no one wants to look at. Trench food is one thing, dangerous food is another. There's a story making the rounds, might be true, might be one of those tales that get fatter every time it's told, about a bloke who ate a spoiled tin and was dead within the hour. No wounds, no fever, just dropped like a sack of wet sand. The word botulism gets tossed around, though no one's quite sure what it means. Some say it's a type of poison that lives in airless places. Others think it's something that happens when meat goes unnaturally quiet. Whatever the science is, one thing's clear. You can't trust the tins. Every batch is a gamble. The labels are often worn off, so you never quite know what's inside. You've opened tins expecting beef and found fish. Once someone swore his was peaches but had got something brown and wriggling instead. It was neither. You begin inspecting the tins like a connoisseur. Knock them, shake them, press on the lid to see if it gives. If it bulges, you toss it. If it hisses, you say a quiet prayer and toss it faster. Then there are the ones that look fine until you taste them. Bland is normal, but bitter? That's a red flag. One man ate half a tin before realising the meat was laced with rust flakes. He spent the next 12 hours vomiting into a ditch, his stomach groaning like an empty drum. Medical staff are used to it. Food poisoning, they say, is part of the job. If you're not bleeding or coughing up bits of yourself, you're not high priority. They hand you chalky tablets and wave you off. Rest and plenty of water, they say, knowing full well the water might be worse than the meat. You try not to think about where the meat comes from. Some say Argentina, others say it's local, slaughtered and canned near the front. One rumour claims some of the tinned meat was originally meant for horses. Another suggests it is horse. You don't care. You'd eat a horse if it meant you didn't spend another night cramping in a latrine pit, praying for mercy. One afternoon you overhear a sergeant arguing with a supply officer about a shipment of tins that arrived already leaking. "What do you want me to do?" the officer snaps. "Write a letter to the cows." They both laugh. You don't. You've learned to work around the danger. One method is the tin test. Cut the meat and leave it out for the rats. If they eat it, you can too. If they sniff and walk away, it goes straight into the fire. It's a low bar, letting sewer vermin be your food critics, but you trust them more than whatever factory-stamped beef product on the lid with crooked lettering. There's an old debate among the men about which tins are safest. Some swear by the round tins with the flat tops. Others claim the square ones are from better suppliers. One guy insists the ones with Cyrillic letters are actually higher quality, even if no one knows what they say. You'd roll your eyes, but you've started keeping mental notes too. In a rare moment of clarity, you remember a school lesson about preservatives. Salt, vinegar, airtight containers. The teacher had held up a jar of pickles like it was magic. You hadn't paid attention then. Now you'd trade a rifle for a lesson in safe pickling. There's a fringe theory that some of the poisonings aren't from spoilage at all, but sabotage. Spies in the supply lines. Foreign agents slipping tainted meat into the crates. It's nonsense, of course, but when you're doubled over in pain, clutching your ribs like they were about to burst, you start to believe in all sorts of things. Once, during a supply lull, the cook tried to boil the contents of several sketchy tins into a single soup. "Kill the bacteria," he said, "or kill us trying." The smell drove 2 men out of the trench. The rest of you ate it anyway. You didn't sleep well that night. The dreams were vivid. One man claims he saw his dead uncle riding a pig through a cabbage patch. You've begun marking the good tins when you find them, scratching a small X into the bottom with your knife. It's silly, but it feels like a little victory. A way to reclaim some control in a place where even your food tries to murder you. As you scrape the bottom of your current tin, this one's safe, thank you whatever trench gods are listening, you remind yourself why you keep eating it. Because it's calories. Because it's there. Because sometimes, against all odds, it isn't spoiled. And when that happens, when the meat is firm, the fat solid, the smell tolerable, it feels like you've won something. It's not much, but in a world where death can come from either end of a rifle or the bottom of a spoon, even a safe meal is worth celebrating. It arrives the way most things do in the trenches, not with fanfare or ceremony, but with a quiet murmur that spreads like a ripple through the dugouts. They've brought the rum. The words roll through the trench like a warm breeze through cold bones, lighting up tired eyes and twitching lips into something dangerously close to a smile. Even the veterans, the ones who rarely react to anything unless it explodes, lift their heads. Rum rations, issued by the quartermaster under strict supervision, measured down to the ounce, ladled into each man's cup like liquid gold. Officially, it's meant to restore morale and combat chill. Unofficially, it's the only thing that takes the edge off a war you've been chewing on since the day you arrived. The sergeant unlocks the heavy metal box with a set of keys that look far too ceremonial for the purpose, as if he's guarding a royal treasure. And in a way, he is. The rum is strong, navy strength, they call it. Dark, sticky, flammable. One whiff and your nose hairs curl. You line up, mess cup in hand, along with every other man not currently unconscious, on sentry duty or actively being shelled. The rule is 1 tot per man, sometimes more if there are extras and the officers are feeling generous, or already a few sips in themselves. When it's your turn, the sergeant ladles out the rum with a solemnity usually reserved for funerals and births. You cradle your cup like it's the last warm thing on earth and take a sip. It hits immediately. Burns a path down your throat, blooms in your chest, settles low and warm like someone just lit a fire inside your ribcage. Your eyes water, and your hands stop shaking. For a few minutes, the trench feels less like a coffin and more like a room. Rum does more than warm, it rewires you, sharpens the jokes, softens the edges of trench walls and yesterday's nightmares. It loosens tongues, stirs up songs, reminds you what it felt like to sit in a pub. Boots dry, coins in your pocket, nothing to fear but an unpaid tab. The lad next to you starts humming, then singing, off-key but with gusto. Before long, half the trench is bellowing some filthy marching tune. You join in? Why not? For 5 minutes, you're not just surviving, you're living. Rum is tradition now, a ritual passed down like an inheritance. They say it started in the Navy, back when sailors needed courage to climb frozen rigging or charge enemy decks. Now it's your daily shield against cold fear and the creeping dread that never quite leaves. There's a strange scholarly debate about it. Some historians claim rum improved discipline, gave men something to look forward to, a way to measure time in a world where time is slippery. Others argue it was dangerous, dulling instincts, encouraging recklessness, masking symptoms of trench trauma with booze. Both are probably true. One thing is certain, when the rum arrives, men remember who they are. Even just for a little while. Of course, the distribution isn't always equal. Officers, naturally, get better spirits. Whiskey, sometimes brandy, poured from glass decanters that look like they belong in a club, not a crater. Once, during a temporary attachment to an artillery unit, you caught a glimpse of their supply tent. Cases of liquor stacked neatly, labelled in neat cursive. You were handed a dram of something amber and smooth that made trench rum taste like radiator fluid. You haven't stopped thinking about it since, but you don't envy the officers too much. Not entirely. They drink to dull a different kind of pain. The pressure of command, the weight of letters they have to write when men don't come back from patrol. You've seen more than one officer drinking alone, muttering names into his cup. And sometimes the rum is late. When that happens, the trench grows quieter, colder. Men snap at each other. Jokes fall flat. 1 day without it is manageable. 2 starts to feel like punishment. 3 and things unravel fast. Then there's the desperate moments when men make their own spirits. The results are mixed. You've tasted one such concoction. Rumour said it was fermented sugar, tea leaves and shoe polish. You took 1 sip and forgot your own name for an hour. Another guy made something from fruit peels and yeast, left to sit in an old sock. He called it dugout brandy. He went blind for a day and swore it was worth it. Alcohol rationing isn't universal. The Americans, when they finally show up, get coffee and cigarettes but no booze. Some say that's why they're so tightly wound. The French? Wine, naturally. Red and rough, issued in old glass bottles or jugs with chalk scribbles on the sides. The Germans have schnapps, clear and sharp, and sometimes beer when they can get it. You hear of one ceasefire where both sides exchanged drinks. French red traded for German gin. For an hour they toasted across the wire. Then the artillery resumed. Back in your trench the rum starts to wear off. The fire in your chest cools. The ache returns. But it's slower now, less sharp. You roll onto your side in the dugout, wrapped in your greatcoat, and breathe out a cloud of warm fog. You think of all the times a few ounces of rum made the difference between giving up and just getting through. Between going over the top with your guts clenched, or going with a shout and a grin. It's not medicine, not really. But sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and the dark. You lick the last drop from the edge of your cup, careful not to waste a molecule, then tuck it back into your kit. The singing's fading. One man's already asleep, snoring loud enough to rattle the boards. Another lies awake, eyes wide, whispering to himself. You close your own eyes, the taste of rum still on your tongue, and let the silence settle. And just before sleep takes you, you think, if this war ever ends, and you make it home, you'll never sip rum again without thinking of this night. You've eaten a lot of strange things in this war, some intended, some accidental, but nothing quite prepares you for the culinary variety parade that comes with a rotating cast of Allied soldiers. Today it's the Australians and Canadians who've moved into the sector next to yours, and within hours the air smells like someone's actually cooking, not just heating rations until they surrender. The Aussies bring something with them that looks like a massive blackened kettle suspended over an open fire. They call it a Dixie, and what they pull from it is a stew so thick it nearly holds its shape when served. It smells like mutton and onions with a whiff of spice that's definitely not in your standard ration pack. One of them, wide-brimmed hat tipped low, sees you eyeing it and shouts, "Oi, Pommy! You ever eaten real food before?" You cross over cautiously at first, mess tin in hand. The man offers you a scoop without ceremony, and you accept like it's a holy relic. It's rich, salty, with a faint sweetness you later learn comes from a touch of damper bread crumbled into the mix. The Australians eat loud and laugh louder, slapping backs and throwing bones into the fire like they're camping, not sitting 100 feet from German machine guns. Then there are the Canadians, polite, apologetic and sneakily resourceful. One of them sets up a makeshift smoker out of a broken munitions box and starts drying strips of beef over it. You ask what it is. He grins. "Jerky, got it from back home, had to punch a train conductor to keep it." He offers you a piece and it's like chewing salted leather soaked in maple and war stories. You love it. The Canadians have also figured out how to make something called bannock, a sort of pan-fried bread made from flour, water and whatever they can scrounge. They fry it on mess tin lids over coals, flipping it like pancakes. It's chewy, greasy and beautiful. You haven't had bread that didn't chip a tooth in weeks. Even the Indian troops passing through carry their own flavours, and if you're lucky, you can barter your way to a bite. Once, during a lull, one of the Sikh soldiers traded you a triangle of spiced lentil cake in exchange for a tin of fish. You bit into it and got hit with cumin, chilli and what might have been coriander. For the next 20 minutes your mouth was on fire, but it was the best kind of pain. Every nationality brings something to the table, literally. The South Africans, with their gamey meats and dried fruit compotes, the Belgians with mystery stews and black bread crusted with coarse salt. The Scots show up with a kind of porridge they call brose, and the Irish bring potatoes with stories of ghosts and whiskey they won't share. Food becomes a sort of language out here. You don't always understand each other's words, but you know what a shared meal means. It means, I see you, I'm hungry too. Let's not talk about what's beyond the wire tonight. There's an argument that breaks out one night over a pot of mystery stew. Some say it's kangaroo meat. Others swear it's rabbit. A Frenchman claims it's rat. Everyone laughs, but no one stops eating. You begin to notice the unofficial food economy of the trenches. Cigarettes trade for spice packets. Chocolate goes for salt. Tea is gold. Someone brings out a tin of condensed milk from a parcel, and a bidding war erupts. You offer the last of your Australian stew and a spare pair of socks. You lose to a Canadian who offers sardines and a promise of moonshine. A few men try to organise a trench potluck. Everyone contributes something from their national stash. The French bring wine, though, of course, thin and vinegary, but still wine. The Australians offer dried fruit and biscuits. Canadians show up with jerky, and you, poor Brit that you are, offer up a biscuit and a small tin of marmalade. It's pitiful, but no one mocks you. Instead, they take turns dipping the biscuit into the marmalade like it's some exotic delicacy. The next day you swap a letter from home for a bite of someone's sausage that tastes suspiciously German. Don't ask, the man says, chewing with a grin. Just eat. You do. The diversity isn't always peaceful, though. Arguments break out. Food becomes a point of pride. One night, an Aussie and a Scot nearly come to blows over whose stew smells worse. A fight's averted only when someone passes around a pouch of Turkish tobacco, and suddenly, all culinary egos are forgotten. Later you hear an academic theory, probably written by someone who's never seen a trench, that multicultural food sharing builds cross-national solidarity. You'd laugh if it weren't kind of true. Eating with someone who doesn't speak your language, who doesn't know your jokes or your mother's name, makes the war feel less enormous, more personal. You realise everyone's hungry for the same things. Warmth, comfort, a brief reprieve from the slaughter. And sometimes it even works. One night, a French soldier sneaks a bottle of brandy across the line and passes it among a cluster of nationalities huddled behind a crumbling dugout. No one talks. No one needs to. The bottle goes around and the silence is warmer than any stew. Eventually the Australians rotate out. So do the Canadians. The Sikhs vanish one dawn like shadows. The food gets simpler again. Less colour, less spice, more bully beef, more biscuits. You're back to the standards. But now, they taste just a little bit worse because you've had something better. And when you sit down with your mess tin and choke down another mouthful of grey, greasy stew, you close your eyes and imagine it's bannock, or jerky, or that triangle of spicy cake that set your mouth on fire. And you smile just for a second, because even in a place built for death, you've tasted the world. Dinner tonight is interrupted by the peculiar whine of a shell spiralling in from somewhere beyond the hills, a high-pitched cry that turns every head in the trench. You stop mid-chew, spoon halfway to your mouth. The shell hits 200 yards off, close enough to shake the boards underfoot, not close enough to kill you. This time, still no one speaks for a moment. Everyone just sits there, hands hovering near mess tins, eyes flicking toward the sky like it might rain steel again. The problem isn't just that shells fall, it's when they fall. And where. You can be in the middle of supper, your first warm food in 2 days, and suddenly the sky opens up and drops fire on your bread. You've watched more meals end in dirt than you've finished. Stew flung through the air. Biscuit tins buried under collapsing walls. Hot tea spilled onto a boot still laced from a stand-to. It gets so that every spoonful you actually swallow starts to feel like a minor miracle. This is what it's like to eat under fire. You grip your tin tighter, crouching lower as another shell whistles overhead, this one landing further off. No one ducks anymore unless it's really close. You develop a kind of instinct for it. Shells you can ignore, shells you can't, and in between you chew. Tonight's stew is barely more than lukewarm, and whatever meat's in it tastes like it passed away peacefully sometime last month. But you don't care. The warmth's enough. You dip a corner of biscuit into it, softening the edges before taking a bite. You've learned not to waste time. Eat quick, eat quiet. Eat knowing the next explosion could arrive mid-mouthful. Across the trench, a man is laughing. Loudly. The kind of laugh that tells you he's given up caring who hears him. He's eating straight from a tin. No spoon, just fingers. And when a shell lands somewhere behind him, he lifts the tin in a toast. You recognise that kind of madness. It's a survival mechanism. If the war can't kill your spirit, it tries to humiliate you instead, by knocking over your dinner. You've seen whole meals flattened. Once, someone managed to trade for an actual egg. An egg! and was minutes away from boiling it in a rusted tin cup when a shell dropped 50 feet away. The blast sent the egg flying into the side of the trench, smashed against a sandbag. The poor guy looked at the mess, then at us, and muttered, "I should have just eaten it raw." That's the thing about eating under fire. It turns food into both a treasure and a target. You start to develop rituals. Eat in a crouch, eat with one hand near your helmet. Never heat both your tea and your stew at the same time. If one gets blown away, at least you've got the other. You learn to shield your tin with your body like it's a newborn infant. There's a scholarly argument you once overheard from a chaplain, that eating in the midst of bombardment helps anchor soldiers in reality. Keeps you human, gives structure to chaos. Maybe, or maybe it just gives you something to do with your mouth other than scream. One particularly rough evening, the shells started dropping during dinner, just as the cook was doling out the rations. No one moved at first. We all stood there, stew sloshing in our tins, eyes on the horizon. And then, crack, one landed closer. Dirt rained down, a few men scattered. The rest held their ground, chewing faster. One guy got a bit of shrapnel in the shoulder, didn't drop his spoon. Some nights the fear makes your hands shake so badly you can't keep the spoon steady. You end up drinking your stew like soup, slurping from the edge while your knees knock together. No one mocks you, everyone's done it. And then there's the quiet after the barrage, the part no one talks about. The way you pick your food back up, dust it off if you can, eat what's left. Even if it's got a bit of grit in it, especially if it does. The grit reminds you you're still here. You remember one night vividly. The shelling was so constant it felt like the ground had a heartbeat. You huddled behind a plank wall, mess tin clutched to your chest, food going cold. When it finally stopped, there was this eerie silence broken only by a rat scurrying across a beam. Someone whispered, "Anyone still hungry?" And the reply came deadpan, "Only for dessert." Later a debate broke out. Is it better to eat before the shelling, or wait it out and risk cold food? You're firmly in the eat when you can camp. You've gone hungry too many times waiting for quiet that never comes. A warm stomach is better than a full one, and besides, who's to say you'll still be upright in 10 minutes? Food under fire takes on a sacred quality. You don't just eat to live, you eat while living, while death sings its tune above you. A spoonful of beans in the middle of a barrage is defiance. A bite of biscuit during incoming is resistance. You finish your meal with one last soggy mouthful and wipe your tin with a corner of your sleeve. A fresh shell lands off to the north, somewhere close to the latrines. A distant curse confirms a near miss. You sip the last of your tea, now cold, and tuck your mess tin back into your kit. A rat climbs over a sandbag, sniffing the air. You chuck a pebble at it, and it scurries away. Victory. Small, pointless, beautiful victory. You huddle back into your corner of the trench, your belly not full but not empty, and let the shell fire fade into the background noise of war. Tomorrow you'll eat again, or try to, and maybe you'll finish a whole meal without interruption, but probably not. It begins with a rumour, as always. You hear it from a runner passing through the trench, his coat flapping, eyes wide with something between excitement and panic. "They hit the depot," he says. "Rear line's a bloody mess. Nothing's moving forward." You watch him disappear into the next dugout, and the silence he leaves behind is heavier than the mud on your boots. At first, no one believes it. The food's been thin before, late, questionable, but it's come, always, eventually. You've grumbled over cold stew and maggoted biscuits, but you've eaten. Now, there's nothing. By evening, the supply line is still dead. The cook's standing beside an empty fire pit, hands on his hips, staring into the nothing like he's waiting for it to apologise. "Ain't even got fat to scrape," he mutters. His stew pot hangs above bare coals like a joke. You peer into it and see your reflection, stretched and dirty, surrounded by smoke. The next day the tension thickens. Breakfast is a tin of jam passed between 6 men, each of you dipping your biscuit in like you're drawing lots. Lunch is tea, just tea, hot water with a ghost of leaves. One man chews the packet. By nightfall the complaints begin to curl into something uglier. Someone snatches a cigarette from a mate's pocket and swears it was barter for food. Another blames the Canadians 2 trenches over, says he saw one with a full mess tin when the rest of you were sucking on dry rations. You've seen this before. When hunger sets in, suspicion follows. Fast. By the 3rd day, it's not just food that's missing. Patience has evaporated. Manners go next, the cooks threaten twice it. He's got nothing to serve but salt and old tea leaves, and someone throws a stone at his head when he says so. It misses, but only barely. Then comes the raid. Quiet, clumsy, desperate. Someone breaks into the officer's supply crate. They don't find much, just a few tins of sardines, some preserved cheese, and a half-eaten fruitcake from a parcel marked "Do Not Touch." But they take it. Every crumb. No one owns up. No one has to. The next morning, the officers are seething, and the tension in the trench is a coiled spring ready to snap. You hear the yelling, boots thundering over duckboards, accusations flying. One officer shouts about discipline. A corporal fires back about starvation. You duck behind a crate and eat the last bit of biscuit hidden in your sock, as damp tastes like wool and desperation, but you eat it anyway. The command response comes fast and predictable. Punishment, extra sentry duty, no rum, letters withheld, a show of control, aimed not at the guilty, but at everyone. You sit on the edge of the trench with your stomach folding in on itself and try to pretend you don't care. But your mouth is dry, your hands shaking, and the back of your throat tastes like tin. That night a man cracks. He's an older private, face worn like weathered stone, always quiet. You find him sobbing beside a latrine trench, holding a crumpled photo of a girl, his daughter maybe. He says he can't stop dreaming of her eating bread. Just bread, he whispers. Hot, thick slices with butter, her mouth full of it. You stay with him until he falls asleep, and when he does, you weep too quietly. There's a debate, as always. Was the raid right? Should you have stood firm, waited for resupply, held the line with dignity and growling bellies? Or is it survival? War isn't fair. Why should food be? One man says it's the start of a mutiny. Another says it's already happened. The next day the depot is back online. Supply wagons roll in under cover of fog, escorted like royalty. Food crates, tins, even something that looks suspiciously like fresh vegetables. Relief rushes through the trench like heat. But it's not joy, it's caution. Everyone eats slower, eyes dart, no one's singing. The cook ladles out stew with trembling hands. You dip your spoon in and lift out a carrot slice, real and orange and not made of chalk. You eat it, and it tastes like forgiveness. Later you find out that several rear-line troops were injured during the depot strike. Horses scattered. A few crates went missing, likely stolen by some other starving unit before yours. There are whispers of a firefight over a wagon load of rum and rice. No one confirms it. That night you sit by a flickering lamp scribbling a letter home with numb fingers. You don't mention the hunger. You tell them the food's fine, that morale is steady, that Christmas parcels are still arriving. You end with a request for socks and jam, your handwriting cramped and smudged. Then you fold it and slide it into your coat. Someone starts singing a hymn in a low voice, and others join in. Not loud, not joyful, just enough to remind you that even starving men can remember the sound of hope. In the darkness you feel something nudge your foot. A rat, fat, fearless, nosing at your mess tin. You kick it gently and mutter, "Not tonight." It stares at you for a second as if to say, "You and me both, mate," then scurries off. You lie back on your board, belly not quite full but no longer clawing, and you think about the thin line between discipline and desperation, between obedience and survival, between loyalty and hunger, and how, when the food runs out again, and it will, you'll cross that line again, without hesitation. You don't remember who brought it in or how it made its way down the trench, but one night, just after stand to, someone passes you a book. Fat, dog-eared, and stained with something that might be grease or blood. On the cover, Army Recipes for Field and Camp, 1915 edition. It looks like it's been through 3 wars, 2 floods, and maybe a kitchen fire. Yet somehow it's still holding together, barely. You flip it open out of boredom. What you find inside is a masterclass in blind optimism and culinary delusion. Recipes for trench pie and pea sausage, mock ham, and best of all, meat surprise. Every page reads like a dare. The margins are filled with handwritten edits from whoever owned it last. Crossed out ingredients, sarcastic commentary, crude sketches of sausages with sad faces. One line simply says, "This one killed Davies, avoid." It's a cookbook from hell. You gather around with a few other lads and read excerpts aloud by candlelight like it's a holy text. There's something strangely beautiful about how formal the instructions are. 1 pound of salt meat shall be boiled with onions until tender. Shall be, as if you have onions. or meat, or a pot that hasn't rusted into an open wound. One recipe suggests frying bacon until crisp, then layering it over boiled cabbage and topping it with a light dusting of pepper and vinegar. Murphy nearly chokes on a dry biscuit. "If I had pepper," he mutters, "I'd snort it straight just to feel again." Another gem offers this. When bread is scarce, biscuit may be crushed, soaked in broth and moulded into loaves. You all glance at the biscuits stacked like bricks in the corner. No one volunteers to try them. Still, the idea of cooking, even theoretically, feels good. It's food not just as necessity, but as creativity, as play. You can't remember the last time anyone cooked anything on purpose. Most meals are just combinations of ingredients surrendered to heat until edible. Encouraged by grim enthusiasm, someone suggests trying one of the desserts. The recipe for ration pudding is laughably simple. Biscuit crumbs, condensed milk and dried fruit, all mashed together and left to sit. No measurements, just vibes. You manage to find the first two ingredients. The third? You substitute raisins with a small handful of foraged currants someone pinched from a ruined garden weeks ago and has been hoarding like rubies. You mash it all together in a mess tin, stir with the end of a bayonet and pass it around. It's dense, cloying, a little sour from whatever those currants have become, but it's sweet. It's new. It's yours. In a place where meals are dictated by logistics and survival, inventing your own recipe, no matter how horrifying, feels like rebellion, like scratching your name into the side of a world that forgot you. There's a historical debate about these wartime cookbooks. Some scholars say they were practical morale boosters, designed to give troops a sense of agency. Others claim they were bureaucratic fantasy, paper bullets against real hunger. The truth probably lies in between. Some cookbooks were official, issued by the army, meant for the field kitchens and base camps. Others were unofficial, compiled by officers or chaplains, passed hand to hand like contraband. One volume, supposedly circulated in Induct 16, includes a recipe for boiled rat with mustard. Probably a joke. Probably. You remember reading somewhere that during a particularly bad winter, a French battalion actually produced a booklet titled La Cuisine de Front, complete with illustrations. It included rat au vin and lark on toast, which was just a joke about how no one had either. Still, the book became a minor legend. Soldiers would quote it like scripture. 2 ways to serve despair, cold or with vinegar. Someone gets inspired and tries a variation on a trench cookbook recipe titled Meat Biscuit Hash. They crush up hardtack, soak it in weak tea, mash in some bully beef and fry it on a piece of corrugated iron heated with a candle. It smells like singed hair, tastes worse. But everyone applauds anyway. You start keeping your own recipe list in a notebook someone left behind. Each entry more ridiculous than the last. Shrapnel soup, a stew with anything you can pick out of the mud, morning shell omelette, no eggs, just hope, and invisible jam tart, chenille, crust only if lucky. It's a budget, but it gets laughs, and laughter is in short supply. The best part about this madness is that no one pretends it's normal. Everyone knows you're playing house in a graveyard, but pretending, even for a few minutes, that food is still something that can be planned, that you have choices, that cooking is an act instead of an accident, it matters. One night someone reads from the recipe book in a mock posh voice. For breakfast, one shall enjoy poached eggs, buttered toast and black tea with cream. A pause, then, oh yes, and unicorn sausage with a side of unicorn tears. The whole trench howls. Then you get quiet, because you do remember poached eggs, buttered toast, the smell of your father's Sunday breakfast. You remember the clink of plates, the scrape of chairs, the way real tea used to smell when steeped in a clean kettle. And now you're here, mixing biscuit paste and jam in a helmet lid, pretending it's dessert. But that's the magic of the trench cookbook. It's not about what's possible, it's about remembering what was, about imagining what might be again. You tuck the book under your blanket that night like it's worth something. It isn't, not in money. But it holds more than recipes. It holds defiance, humour, memory, humanity. Even if the only thing it teaches you to make is a better joke. You're writing another letter home, trying to keep the tone light. You describe the weather, mud with a splash of gloom, and you make a joke about how your boots are developing their own personalities. You even throw in a line about a pie the cook made, though you skip the part about the charred biscuit crust and the mystery filling that might have been beetle. Your pencil hovers, then you add, "We eat well enough." You lie. Everyone lies in letters. At first you didn't. You tried to be honest. Ooh. You wrote about the hunger, the spoiled meat, the endless stew that tasted like punishment. You told them about the tea that came out of the pot already grey, about the days when you skipped meals because your stomach had turned against you. And your mother wrote back, worried, frantic, pleading with you to eat more. You're a growing boy, she said. Don't let them starve you. So now, you lie. You tell her about tinned peaches you haven't seen in months, about coffee rich enough to stain your teeth, about fresh bread that doesn't crumble like chalk. You describe Sunday roasts and hearty breakfasts and pretend you've forgotten what hunger feels like. It's easier that way. Safer. You're not alone. Everyone censors themselves. Some men even keep 2 letters, one for the censors and one real, stuffed into a second envelope with a wink. Most just stick to the script. We're holding strong, morale is high, the food is decent, it's not so bad. It's practically a code now. Decent means inedible, but warm. Hearty means it didn't make you vomit. Fresh means someone found it before the rats did. The trick is to sound cheerful enough that no one worries, but vague enough to slip past the actual censors, the ones paid to read your words and black out anything that might spark doubt back home. Because food isn't just about survival, it's about perception. You know this, command knows it. A well-fed army is a brave army, or so the saying goes, but that idea has to extend beyond the trenches. Mothers need to believe their sons are being cared for. Wives need to think their husbands are still strong. Children must imagine their fathers eating bacon and eggs before battle. So you keep lying. You remember one letter a mate showed you, from his sister. She'd baked a fruitcake and sent it through the post. She wrote, "I hope you eat it with tea and share it with your friends." The cake arrived 2 weeks late, soaked through from sudden rain, mildewed and crawling. He still cut it into neat slices and passed them around like communion. You all pretended it was delicious. There's another kind of letter, the guilt letter. The ones where they tell you what they're giving up. Rationing's gotten worse at home and people are making do with less. Some families are skipping meat altogether. Children eat potatoes 3 meals a day. Your father writes about ploughing up the back garden for beets. Your aunt tried to make a wartime pudding with breadcrumbs and vinegar. You read these letters and realise the hunger isn't just yours. It's everywhere. But here's the strange part. The worse it gets back home, the better you want to make it sound here. If they're suffering, you can't be. That's the unspoken agreement. You carry their sacrifices like extra weight in your rucksack. They give you food parcels and warm words, and you give them comfort through lies. Sometimes you wonder if they believe you. Your mother must know what you're leaving out. She raised you. She knows when you're dodging the truth, but she never presses. Her letters are always bright, filled with talk of neighbours and weather and how the cat has taken over your bed. She says she's making your favourite stew for your welcome home dinner. You cry the first time you read that. Then there's the fringe belief, the whispered idea that some of the food letters are staged. Not written by family, but by staff created to keep you calm. It sounds insane, until you meet a man who swears his last 3 letters from home were word for word the same. He doesn't know whether to laugh or scream. You find yourself editing memories now, not just meals. You forget the stomach cramps, the days you went without. You exaggerate the time someone found a chocolate bar. The once-a-month tin of pears passed around like treasure. Your letters become stories you wish were true. Once you wrote about a stew so good you went back for seconds. The reality, it made you so nauseous you poured it into a shell hole when no one was looking. There's a certain artistry to the deception. You learn how to sprinkle in just enough complaint to sound real. The stew's gone a bit watery lately, but we still manage fine. You write, "I'd kill for a real cup of tea," like you're joking, but you're not. At night, by candle or weak lamp, men huddle over letters like sacred texts. Some read them aloud, some keep them folded and unread, afraid of what they might say, or what they don't say. Some have stopped getting letters at all. You tuck your latest one into your coat. It smells faintly of smoke and sweat and pencil lead. You can't remember the last time you told the full truth, but you can remember how your mother's voice sounds when she laughs. That's what you write for. Tomorrow there might be food, or there might not. Maybe it'll rain and the trench will flood and your breakfast will float away in a bowl of brown water. Maybe the cook will cobble together something new. Rat stew, turnip mash, dandelion tea. Whatever it is, you'll eat it. You'll live, and then you'll write home about the roast beef, the thick gravy, the potatoes boiled just right, and you'll sign it, love always. because lies are easier on a full heart than an empty stomach. You arrive back in England on a brief leave, boots still caked with mumble or mud that's more France than leather now, and your stomach still tangled in knots from whatever stew-like substance passed as breakfast. You expect comfort, home-cooked meals, clean linens, silence, but instead you walk right into another war. Not one fought with rifles and shells, but with coupons, queues and gardens planted in place of flowers. This is civilian hunger, and it has a very different flavour. The train drops you near the village you left behind. Familiar faces wave. A few don't recognise you at first, and you don't blame them. You're thinner, your cheeks sunken, your eyes set just a little too deep. But it's not the welcome that surprises you, it's the fields, the backyards, even the tiny green strip behind the post office. All of it turned to soil. Crops growing where children used to play, beans where roses were, potatoes in flower boxes. It's the rise of the Victory Garden, and it's blooming across every available inch of England. Your mother meets you at the door, hugs you like she's afraid you'll disappear if she lets go. Inside, the house smells of boiled cabbage and vinegar. Not exactly what you dreamed about during freezing nights in a dugout, but it's warm, and it's food, and it doesn't come from a rusted tin, so you almost cry when you sit down. Dinner is plain, boiled vegetables, some bread, and a bit of suet pudding that tastes like dust and devotion. She apologises, says the butcher's shop hasn't seen a proper cut of meat in weeks. We get bones, mostly, she tells you, for soup, if we're lucky. You look down at your plate and feel for the first time in months, ashamed to be fed. You've come from hell, yes, but they've been quietly starving for you. Children run past the window with slices of carrot on strings, pretending they're lollipops. Your father's tending to a scraggly plot behind the shed, where onions and lettuce try their best in the clay-heavy soil. He shows you his compost pile like it's treasure. In a way it is. They have had to learn, just like you have, that nothing is wasted. Not peels, not bones, not time. Back in London, you hear it's worse. Ration cards rule everything. The newspapers print tips for stretching meat with breadcrumbs and water. Wartime cake is made without eggs or butter. One woman wrote a column about frying nettles and seasoning them with salt from the sea. Another suggested using mashed potato to stretch out flour for bread. You eat a slice of that bread and it tastes like memory, soft and sad. There's an open scholarly argument whether the home front rationing system was the model of fair distribution or an exercise in polite starvation. Officials boasted that no one went hungry, but plenty of people, especially in cities, got just enough to not quite starve. Barely fed is not the same as well fed, and when a shipment of American corn or Canadian oats made it into port, you'd think it was Christmas. Children licked spoons for flavour. Families shared a single egg like it was gold. The idea of home has changed. It's no longer the land of plenty you fantasised about between bites of hardtack. Now, it's a place of quiet endurance. You see women swapping recipes like war strategies, trading sugar for flour like diplomats. One neighbour shows you how she bakes fake apple pie, turnips shaved thin and soaked in cinnamon. It's the illusion that counts, she says with a smile. You believe her. Your younger brother brags about the rabbit he snared for Sunday's dinner. You tell him he's practically a general in this food war. He beams. You don't tell him that the stew they made from it smelled exactly like something you ate near Ypres. Some details are best left behind. In your letter to a mate still in the trenches, you write about the garden, the bread, the way even the pigeons here look thinner. You don't lie, but you don't tell everything. It's a different kind of war, but it scars just the same. Your mum insists on packing you a parcel before you return. She includes jam, 2 slices of her best bread, and a crumbled biscuit wrapped in wax paper. She's not supposed to send this much. It breaks every rule, but you let her. Because you know that out there, that parcel won't just be food. It'll be proof that someone's still fighting for you in kitchens, in gardens, in ration queues. The day before you leave, your dad hands you a small tin. Inside is a spoon polished and wrapped in cloth. Your grandfather's, he says. He used it in the Crimea. Thought it might bring you luck. You nod, throat tight. You'll carry it next to your army-issued cutlery. A relic from another war, another hunger, another time when food meant more than survival. It meant home. As you board the train back to the front, you watch the countryside blur past. Gardens dot the land like secret defences. And you realise that the war doesn't just stretch across trenches and barbed wire. It runs through dinner tables, larders, and half-empty pantries, through carrot peels and bone broth and empty bellies that never complain. You once believed that the front was the only place where war was real. Now you know better. And tomorrow, when you unwrap your mother's jam and spoon it onto the stale biscuit, you'll close your eyes and taste something no trench ever offered. Love, in rationed teaspoons. The war ends, not with a grand bang or cinematic flourish, but with a kind of hesitant exhale. One morning you wake up to silence. No shelling, no shouted orders, just birdsong and boots crunching without urgency. Word trickles down the trench like molasses. The armistice has been signed. Fighting is over. You're going home. Except not quite. First you wait, then you march, then you wait again, and eventually you're on a boat that smells like oil and relief clutching your pack like it might vanish. When you finally step onto English soil, it's like a dream filmed in too soft focus. People cheer. Brass bands play. Someone hands you an apple, a real fresh apple. You bite into it, and the sweetness nearly floors you. You chew slowly, letting the juice run down your chin. This is what peace tastes like. Tart, cool, unapologetically alive. But your body isn't sure what to do with real food anymore. You eat your first proper meal at a rehab centre for returning soldiers, a roast dinner served with gravy and mint jelly, and vegetables that haven't been boiled into submission. Your fork shakes. You get halfway through your plate before your stomach rebels. You excuse yourself, ashamed, the meal sitting like guilt in your gut. Food at home feels different now, familiar but strange. Like a song you used to know but can't quite hum. You sit down with family, pass plates, pretend like it's normal, but your eyes dart for ration portions, your ears twitch at every silence. Someone drops a spoon, and you flinch so hard your niece starts crying. The doctor says your digestion will take time. So will your nerves, so will everything. You nod, but inside you're still counting calories like they might disappear. You hide bits of food in your coat pocket, not because you need to, just because you did. There's a strange scholarly argument bubbling up among experts, whether trench food led to long-term shifts in eating habits for an entire generation. Some say yes, that soldiers returned with new preferences, new rituals. Others argue it was all trauma, nothing more, nothing less. You sit there eating cold bread and jam at 3 a.m. in your pantry and think maybe it's both. You're not the only one. At a veterans hospital you meet a man who won't touch anything that isn't canned. "Trust the tin," he says. "Never lied to me." Another eats with his back against a wall, spoon gripped like a weapon. One man only eats alone, says food tastes like peace, and he hasn't earned that yet. Back in town, shops are changing. Cafes advertise soldiers' breakfasts. Thick bacon, strong tea, bread you don't need a hammer to eat. There's a rush for canned food, oddly enough. Civilians have grown used to it. Some even like it. One woman brags about her stewed pears in syrup like it's a family heirloom. You try to go back to work, sit in an office, pick up a ledger, eat lunch from a paper bag, but it's hollow. You miss the smoke, the stew, the strange warmth of sharing a biscuit in a freezing hole with 6 other souls. You think about Murphy, who made rat pie, about Jenkins, who cried over a tin of jam, about the cook who once served dandelion tea like it was champagne. You start volunteering at a soup kitchen, of all places, not out of pity, but memory. You stir broth the way you remember watching the field cook do it. You serve men who look like you did, hollowed out but still walking. You crack jokes about hardtack and one guy actually laughs. At night you write letters to the men who made it. You send packages to the ones who didn't. You keep a biscuit in a glass jar on the mantel, not because you'll ever eat it, but because it survived, and so did you. Sometimes you dream of the trench cookbook. You wake up convinced it's real, that you could flip to page 72 and find a recipe for potato bravery or fearless broth. You keep a notebook now. In it, recipes and memories blur together. Mud coffee, 2 parts imagination, 1 part boiled water. Desperation pudding, served cold. Hope, pickled. You carry a spoon everywhere. The one from your dad wrapped in cloth. It's silly, but it helps. One morning, years later, you eat breakfast in your garden, tea, toast, eggs with the yolks like sunbursts, and it finally tastes right. Not because it's perfect, but because it's quiet. No whine of shells, no crunch of boots, no rations counted and recounted. Just birds and steam rising from your cup. You finish eating, you wash your plate, you breathe, and for the first time in what feels like a century, you don't wonder when the food will run out. You've come a long way, from the grim, clattering arrival into the trenches to this quiet place where the kettle whistles softly and the spoon rests in your hand. not clenched but calm. The war is over, the food is different, and so are you. But you still remember. You remember every tin opened with trembling fingers, every biscuit broken and passed around like a sacrament. You remember the smell of scorched fat, the taste of chalk masquerading as bread, the joy of a single spoonful of jam bright and defiant against the grey. What you ate wasn't just fuel. It was morale. It was identity. It was a thin wall between you and despair. You learned to treasure the smallest things, a hot cup of tea, a rat chased from your rations, a parcel from home wrapped in string and love. You saw how hunger changed men, how it sharpened tempers and dulled eyes, how it made people brave and selfish and kind, sometimes all at once. You saw food used as a weapon, as a comfort, as a joke, as a reason to keep going. And you saw most clearly that food is memory. The shape of a biscuit can take you back to a night in the mud. The smell of boiled cabbage brings your mother's worn hands to mind. Even now, a spoon against your teeth reminds you of laughter in a trench lit only by matchlight. So as you sit here tonight, far from that place, letting the steam curl above your tea, know this. You carried more than a pack through that war. You carried stories, taste and touch and hunger that never fully leaves. You survived more than bullets. You survived boiled turnips, spoiled tins and mystery stew, and that, friend, is its own kind of medal. Now rest. Let your stomach settle, your heart beat slow, and your breath deepen. The war is over. The meal is done. The lights are low. You're home.